This program contains material and graphic images that may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Columbus, Ohio, Saturday, January 14th, 1984. 19-year-old gymnast Cynthia McGee is at Ohio State University Medical Center, recovering from severe but non-life-threatening injuries. She had been hit by a car while riding her bike. 11:15 p.m. A doctor in the hospital's residency program visits McGee in room 901 to draw blood. Not long after he leaves, she develops a fever of 102 degrees.
At midnight, a code blue sounds. Doctors rush to her bedside, only to find Cynthia is dead.
An autopsy will later reveal that she died from cardiopulmonary arrest.
1 week later, 21-year-old Richard DeLong dies unexpectedly in the same hospital.
DeLong is found dead in his room 964 at 6:03 p.m. on January 20th. According to hospital staff, he'd gone from stable condition to imminent death following a visit from the same intern doctor who'd also been present at the time of Cynthia McGee's passing.
Both deaths are very mysterious.
Just after DeLong's death, his wife receives a call from the intern doctor who tells her Ricky died of a heart attack. The family requests an autopsy, but one isn't performed because the intern doesn't submit the paperwork.
Richard DeLong's body would later be exhumed. The medical examiner discovered that DeLong suffocated to death. Obviously, someone at the hospital had intentionally placed a ball of gauze into his throat. Now, this resulted in a constricted airway, and hence, he passed away.
University Medical Center, Tuesday, January 24th, 1984. A nurse enters a room on the 9th floor where 43-year-old Rain Walter is being treated for a brain tumor.
As the nurse nears the bed, what she discovers is that Walter is now gasping for air. He's turning blue, called an oxygen deprivation. The patient then loses consciousness and subsequently flatlines. Now, just 10 minutes prior, Walter had been visited by the same intern doctor who'd been present during the McGee and the DeLong deaths.
Medical staff are perplexed as to what is causing this sudden outbreak of unexplained deaths.
Tuesday, January 31st, 1984, 9:45 a.m. Ruth Barrick is in room 968 talking to a nurse. The elderly woman is doing well, having been admitted 2 weeks earlier after hitting her head at home. A doctor enters the room and tells the nurse he's going to check Barrick.
The nurse leaves, and within 20 minutes she comes back and finds Ruth unconscious.
Doctors have no idea what's caused this. On that occasion, they're able to save her life. But 1 week later, that's not the case.
While still in the hospital, the same situation occurred, but she died.
Panic sets in.
Multiple people have died in the one area of the hospital over the last month, and the nurses are beginning to talk, the doctors too. One thing these patients had in common was an intern named Michael Swango.
Swango had been assigned to the 9th floor at Ohio State Medical Center.
He was on the floor every single time one of these patients died.
One of the nurses on staff relays to the hospital administrators that the night that Cynthia McGee passed away, Swango had entered her room with a syringe, claiming that he was going to draw her blood. Yet 45 minutes later, we find McGee dead.
In Ruth Barrick's case, her nurse had more damning allegations.
And a nurse claimed that she saw him injecting chemicals into patient Ruth Barrick. On the morning of January 31st, 1984,
patients Rena Cooper and Iwonia Utz, who'd shared room 900 at the hospital for 12 days, have shockingly similar accusations.
Just after 9 p.m. on February 7th, 1984, Swango entered their room and inserted a syringe into Cooper's IV.
Seconds later, the 69-year-old stops breathing. Utz screams for help.
Moments later, hospital staff rush in. Cooper is alive, yet paralytic. She responds to resuscitation efforts, and within 15 minutes, the paralysis diminishes. She's now able to breathe on her own.
Meanwhile, a nurse's aide spots Swango down the hall exiting room 966. The aide goes inside and finds a used syringe in the sink.
The nurse's aide retrieves the syringe. He renders it to the nurse, who's in charge of the ward, and then relates to her exactly and precisely what it was that he observed.
Swango is questioned about the Cooper case and the unexplained deaths taking place on the 9th floor. He denies any involvement and claims he's the target of a witch hunt.
Swango is placed on probation pending the outcome of an investigation. After weeks of investigation, no further evidence is found of Swango's guilt, and he's fully exonerated, with senior officials believing that he was the victim of a smear campaign within the hospital.
Swango is reassigned to a different wing of the hospital to continue his residency. But by mid-February 1984, a new wave of deaths has everyone on edge.
This time, 3 patients mysteriously died, with no medical explanation for it.
The hospital administration is desperate to find answers. They have no evidence of foul play, but they do know one thing. They can't afford for the public to panic and lose trust. They need a scapegoat, and they find one in Michael Swango. Rather than launching another investigation into these unexplained deaths and notifying the police, they decide to hold an annual review of Michael Swango.
His immediate supervisor rates him as poor, and he is dismissed from his job. Problem solved as far as the hospital goes.
Swango is devastated. In July 1984, he goes back to his hometown, Quincy, Illinois. There, he lands a job as an EMT for Adams County.
When Swango starts working as a paramedic, colleagues deem him as being extremely odd.
One night, Michael shocks the rest of the rescue crew by saying that his ultimate fantasy is to be called to the scene of a horrific school bus accident.
He also comments that he admires serial killers. Although some are creeped out, others understand that this dark sense of humor that he may have might be a way of coping with the things that he sees during his work life.
But within months of being on the job, something very strange occurs.
There's a breakout of mysterious illnesses that occur in the rescue squad headquarters where Michael Swango is now working.
Quincy, Illinois, Friday, September 14th, 1984. 4 members of Swango's rescue team are hanging out in the crew lounge at the hospital when he walks in with a box of donuts.
The ambulance crew eats them, then an hour or so becomes very sick. Dizziness, nausea, throwing up.
All 4 men go to the ER.
It's a very strange condition that none of them can explain, yet they somehow link it back to the donuts.
In June 1984, Dr. Michael Swango is fired from Ohio State University Medical Center, where he served his residency, after at least 8 patients die mysteriously. Just 3 months later in September, as Swango's working as an EMT in his hometown of Quincy, Illinois, some of his colleagues start to become gravely ill.
One night on a ruse, the rescue crew takes initiative. They fake an emergency call. It gets Swango out of the paramedics' lounge. The minute he departs, they subsequently search his duffel bag.
They find ant poison, which happens to contain arsenic. There's no reason Swango should be bringing this type of material into the rescue squad.
Of the 2 boxes of ant killer, one is empty, the other is full.
This group of paramedics who have been suffering these maladies decide to set a trap.
Quincy, Illinois, Friday, October 19th, 1984. One of the EMTs leaves a pot of unsweetened tea in the crew lounge, suspecting that Swango will tamper with it. When members of the team return and taste it, the tea seems overly sweet.
They then transfer the tea into a container and have it tested at a local lab. The results? It's laced with arsenic.
The lab report is turned over to the Adams County Sheriff Department.
Quincy, Illinois, Friday, October 26th, 1984. Swango receives a call at work, asking him to come down to Adams County Sheriff's Department. Upon arrival, he's arrested, Mirandized, and charged with 7 counts of battery, 1 for each alleged poisoning.
They secure a search warrant for Michael Swango's apartment. They find an amalgamation of guns, knives, syringes, chemical compounds, recipes for concocting and mixing chemicals. There's even a book called The Poor Man's James Bond, which describes how to commit murder.
On April 22nd, 1985, Michael Swango goes to court. At his trial, Swango adamantly denies poisoning his colleagues and his fellow workers. He claims instead the only reason he has the ant poison is because there's an infestation at his apartment.
Michael Swango is found guilty of 6 counts of aggravated assault and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. Swango's application for a license to practice medicine in Illinois is revoked.
In August 1987, Swango is released from prison on good behavior after serving just 2 years of a 5-year sentence.
Afterwards, Michael Swango decides to leave Illinois with his girlfriend, Rita Dumas, and go to Virginia.
The couple sets up camp in Newport News and marries in July 1989.
Rather than go on to build a new life with Rita, he is absolutely committed and driven to become a doctor again.
From 1989 to 1991, Michael Swango applies to multiple hospitals around the country. He somehow has to explain the time he spent in jail. He lies on his applications. He tells anyone who will read them that he was involved in a barroom brawl. He even had numerous forged documents supporting this story.
But no one is fooled. In January 1991, Swango's wife Rita leaves him.
Just after his wife Rita leaves him, Swango comes across 26-year-old nurse Kristen Kinney. Next thing you know, they're involved in a whirlwind romance.
Kristen's friends are very concerned that the relationship is moving too fast, and many of them are talking in her ear about the concerning past of Swango and saying negative things about him. Kristen laughs it off because everything is starting to fall into place for her, particularly when Swango proposes to her and he accepts a place at South Dakota University residency program.
Swango and his fiancée moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota in May 1992.
Everything's going swimmingly until Michael applies for membership to the American Medical Association. They do the requisite background checks to the full extent, and they know what his background and past consist of. His Quincy incidents, the attempted poisonings, as well as the veil of suspicion while he was at the Ohio State University Medical Center. They deny his membership to the AMA, they contact his present hospital in South Dakota, and before long, he's out of a job.
October 1992, Dr. Michael Swango is fired from his job at the University of South Dakota after the American Medical Association exposes his criminal past. The fallout will have fatal consequences.
Michael's fiancée, Kristen Kinney, is shocked to find out about these allegations from his past. She's beside herself, and she wants no more of her relationship with Swango.
Kinney keeps a diary. Now, in it, she mentions several instances where she comes down with inexplicable bouts of this blurry vision. She also complains of persistent nausea. Obviously, something's going sideways.
Kristen leaves Michael and moves back home to live with her parents in Newport News, Virginia.
Michael applies to the New York University at Stony Brook Medical Center, and sending some of the same forged letters and the same lies on his application, he actually gets hired by them.
Swango shares the good news with Kristen and pleads for a second chance. She relents and starts seeing him again.
On July 1st, 1993, Swango reports to his new job, Northport, New York. It's a Veteran Administration hospital. Before long, patients start dying mysteriously.
The first death of a patient named Dominic Buffalino occurs the morning after Swango starts the job. 4 more patients die suspiciously when Swango's around.
It always seems to happen at night, with first a form of paralysis setting in and then heart failure, and they're dead.
While deaths surround Swango in New York, back in Virginia, his girlfriend Kristen has become completely unhinged.
She's actually admitted to a psychiatric hospital after she's found walking incoherent, naked, in the streets around her home. On July 15th, 1993, 2 weeks after Michael Swango gets his new job, Kristen drives herself to a park and shoots herself.
Because it's a suicide, the coroner does not check Kinney's body for poisons, but a lock of her hair, clipped by her mother as a keepsake, is later tested.
The tests indicate that Kristen had levels of arsenic in her body. Kristen's mother, Sharon, vows to avenge her daughter's death.
She tells a friend everything about Michael's past. That friend contacts the Veteran Administration Hospital in New York. Michael Swango's secret is now revealed to his new employers, and before long, he's out of a job.
How and when did the once promising doctor get so derailed? Swango excels as a student.
In 1972, he becomes valedictorian of his high school and is named the National Merit High School Student of the Year.
Swango enrolls in Millikan University, but quits unexpectedly to join the Marines. He does 2 years, earning the rank of sergeant and an honorable discharge, before returning home and attending Quincy University, a changed man.
He starts collecting newspaper and magazine clippings of tragedies, murders, sex crimes, and he puts them in his book and keeps them and looks at them over and over again. He has some sort of an obsession with death, and it seems that he gets pleasure from it.
Swango graduates with honors from college and is accepted into medical school at Southern Illinois University.
During his time at SIU, patients seemed to suddenly expire, leading his fellow med students to nickname him 00 Swango, which meant he had a license to kill.
By November 1993, Dr. Michael Swango, who has a history of mysterious deaths and alleged poisonings everywhere he goes, finds himself the target of yet another criminal investigation. The FBI suspects he committed fraud and murder at a VA hospital in Long Island, New York.
Unbeknownst to the FBI and anyone else for that matter, in November of 1994, Michael Swango leaves the U.S. and heads to Zimbabwe, Africa. There he finds a position within the Mene Lutheran Hospital and begins treating patients there. They have no idea of his deadly background.
At first, hospital staff are extremely impressed with his skills as a doctor, but by the summer of 1995, the situation takes a fatal turn.
People were dying, and they tended to be dying without explanation and on Swango's watch. Convinced that Michael Swango is killing patients at the Zimbabwe, police investigators obtain a search warrant for his cottage. Once inside, they find various concoctions of poisons and other means of hurting and killing people.
In October 1995, hospital administrators fire Swango. Now he retaliates, insisting that he's innocent, then, unbelievably, files a wrongful termination lawsuit.
The decision is overturned. He's even awarded $1,000 as a result of the lawsuit.
Swango works at Impilo until March 1996, when hospital officials dismiss him due to overwhelming concerns about his background.
A number of patients had suddenly died, yet none of these had been directly linked to Dr. Swango at that point in time.
Meanwhile, Zimbabwean authorities continue to investigate the expat physician. But before Zimbabwean officials can move in and arrest Swango, he flees the country.
Interpol is now notified. An international manhunt is undertaken. The Swango trail is ice cold until June 1997. Swango resurfaces. He applies and obtains a job as a doctor in Saudi Arabia.
Johannesburg, South Africa. Friday, June 27, 1997. Michael Swango boards a flight for the U.S.
Swango must stop in America to secure a work visa before he can start the job in Saudi Arabia.
He never thought that his passport information had been flagged, and once he hit the ground in Chicago, the customs people grabbed him and placed him under arrest.
The federal government doesn't yet have enough evidence to bring murder charges against Swango, so they charge the itinerant doctor with fraud for forging documents to gain employment at the Veterans Hospital in New York, the last place he worked in the U.S.
In March 1998, Michael pleads guilty to defrauding the government. On July 12, 1998, Swango is sentenced to the maximum amount of time for these fraudulent crimes, 3.5 years in prison.
On July 11, 2000, less than 1 week before he's scheduled to be released from prison, Michael Swango is charged with the murders of 3 VA patients.
At the same time, the Zimbabwe officials charged Michael Swango with 5 counts of murder and 7 counts of poisoning patients. Now, there were 2 continents filing charges against this man.
Long Island, New York, Monday, July 17, 2000. Swango's indicted in federal district court. He pleads not guilty to the charges.
At first, Swango pleads not guilty to the U.S.-based murder charges. However, he's facing the death penalty in New York, possible death penalty in Zimbabwe. So those 2 things are on the table. He elects to go ahead and plead guilty September 6, 2000.
The deal worked out with his lawyers was he would do his prison time in the U.S.
Swango receives a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Swango just may be one of the most notorious serial killers of modern times. No one knows exactly how many people Michael Swango killed. It's anywhere between 4 and 60 between 2 continents. However, one thing experts know for sure: if given the opportunity, he'd do it again.
This program contains material and graphic images that may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Clovis, California, Wednesday, July 9th, 2003, 9 a.m. 45-year-old nursing administrator Timothy Schuster shows up for work at St. Agnes Hospital. Minutes later, the father of 2 is hit with devastating news.
He's fired. Now no longer has a job, completely out of the blue, blindsides him.
The layoff hits Timothy hard. He's embroiled in a bitter divorce with his estranged wife, Larissa. Now jobless, Schuster's worried about the battle over his 2 children. 18-year-old Kristen lives with grandparents in Missouri. 12-year-old Tyler lives with Larissa. But Tim's unhappy with the visitation arrangements.
Timothy Schuster is described by many of us as being kind of a Mr. Mom. Very nice, very mellow, very attentive father. What's at stake here? Are the custody of the 2 children.
She was not making things easy for her husband in this divorce.
That evening, Tim has dinner with his good friends Bob and Mary Solis and Vic Uribe.
His three friends now realize that he's in real dire straits, so what they're trying to do is keep him from going off the edge.
Tim leaves the Solis residence around 10 p.m., but makes plans to meet Bob and Mary for breakfast the following morning.
However, Timothy never showed up. Tim missing this breakfast is highly unusual. His friends know him as being meticulous and always on time.
So the Solises realize that something's sideways here. The Solises contact Victor Uribe, and they ask him to go over and check on Timothy's residence.
As Tim is going through a divorce with his wife, Larissa, he is presently living alone.
Vic Uribe arrives at Tim's around 11:30 that morning. He knocks on the door, but there's no answer, so he begins to look around the property.
Uribe checks in the garage. Guess what? There's this pickup truck, locked, no keys in it. He becomes alarmed at this point in time, so he initiates a phone call to the Clovis Police Department.
The police show up at Tim's house. They get inside.
Officers find Tim's watch and cell phone on his bedroom dresser.
All Tim's personal possessions are where they should be, but he's nowhere to be found.
There's no evidence of forced entry, and Schuster's wallet, containing money and credit cards, is in the glove box of his truck. So cops are pretty sure they're not dealing with a robbery. But what are they dealing with?
The police are looking at it from a different lens. And what they're seeing is an individual who has moved out due to an impending divorce, that has been fired from his job, and they find out that he does in fact have a handgun registered to him, and they're wondering that he may have gone off somewhere and possibly committed suicide.
At 5:30 that night, Timothy is supposed to pick up his son for a pre-scheduled visitation. His last opportunity to see Tyler for 2 weeks, because Larissa was taking him out of town to visit relatives and go to Disney World.
Tyler's awaiting the Thursday night 5:30 pickup from his dad at his mom's manicurist. He never shows up. It's at that point that Larissa says to her manicurist, "I have a feeling my divorce is going to be going my way."
Both Larissa and Tyler called Timothy multiple times, no answer on the phone.
On July 11th, Bob and Mary Solis go to the Clovis Police Department and report Tim Schuster missing. The first step in the missing persons investigation is to take a closer look at Tim's home. An officer retrieves Tim's cell phone from the dresser and starts calling the numbers of recent contacts.
Nobody's heard from him, all these different numbers they've called.
The officer calls Larissa, who owns and operates an agricultural chemicals lab. She claims she has not spoken to Tim for a while. Next, the officer speaks to Larissa's manicurist, who's unafraid to air the Schusters' dirty laundry.
The officer learns that the Schusters are going through a divorce. It's not a pleasant one, and there is some arguing back and forth between the two of them. With that in mind, he turns this case over to the detectives.
Before long, 2 Clovis police detectives conduct a deeper examination of Tim Schuster's house. They find something odd near the front door.
They notice behind one of the chairs there's some damage to the wall. It looks like possibly some sort of a struggle took place right in that area.
In the bedroom, investigators find Tim's briefcase, which contains a cassette tape.
They play the cassette tape. It's from an answering machine, and on it are numerous messages from Larissa, his estranged wife, in a very threatening manner.
I want to see all of the stuff you've taken, and if you don't, I'm going to call the cops, and I'm going to come and get it. Do you hear me, you?
She was very vitriolic toward him in terms of how much she hated him and basically was going to destroy him.
You pathetic bastard ass. I tell you what, I am so glad I'm getting divorced from you because I can't stand your guts.
So Larissa's going to be asked by the detectives to come down to the police station.
Clovis Police Department, Friday, July 11th, 2003, 10 p.m. Larissa meets with detectives to discuss Tim's disappearance.
What is your gut feeling on where he's at right now? Is he alive? Is he dead? What's your gut feeling?
I don't know. I don't know.
Larissa told the police that she goes sometimes weeks without talking to Tim.
According to Larissa, the last contact she had with Tim was an email on July 8th.
She confirmed he'd be there a few days later at her manicurist to pick up Tyler.
At about 6 o'clock, Tyler usually goes out, and sits in the window of the shop. And about 6:10, Tyler came in the room and he said, "Dad hasn't picked you up yet?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh, well, maybe he's running a little late because usually he's right on time."
Taking Timothy's phone, one of the things we're able to detect is the fact that at 2 in the morning, Larissa had placed a phone call to Timothy. Now, this is prior to his not showing up anywhere the following day. So obviously detectives become somewhat suspect of this.
Larissa claims that evening that she possibly dialed someone's number in her sleep. She denied actually having called Tim even though the number she claims is in her speed dial.
I remember waking up on the couch and I had my cell phone and it looked like I might have hit a number or something and, cancel it or whatever.
The officers ask Larissa if she has her cell phone on her. She claims she left it at home.
Now, during one of the breaks in the interview, one of the detectives walks out, sees her vehicle, walks over, looks in, and he sees Larissa's cell phone sitting there inside the vehicle.
The detectives ask Larissa to get the phone from her car. She does. On the way back into the police station, she's nervous, she's fidgeting with the phone, and when they finally sit down and look at her speed dial, they realize her estranged husband is not found on there.
Larissa admits that she called Tim that night, and the call lasted no longer than 30 seconds. The purpose of the call? She was worried Tim wouldn't return Tyler in time for their trip to Disney World.
Are you the type of person that could have anything to do with him missing?
No, not at all. We've had our problems and I dislike him and we haven't been able to get along, but I couldn't do that to my son.
The next day, Larissa and Tyler fly out of town.
On Wednesday, July 9th, 2003, 45-year-old nursing administrator Timothy Schuster is suddenly laid off from his job in Fresno, California. The following day, he vanishes without a trace. Police soon learn that Tim has been going through an acrimonious divorce with his wife, Larissa, who lives separately with their 12-year-old son, Tyler. After authorities question Larissa and catch her in a lie, they decide to subpoena her phone records.
One of the numbers in Larissa's cell phone records is that of a James Fagoni.
Just days earlier, detectives found a ledger inside Tim Schuster's house with Fagoni's name written down. But who is he?
James Fagoni. He's a 21-year-old male who supposedly was Larissa's helper, babysitter at times, and somehow it seems through multiple phone calls, she had some kind of an ongoing relationship with him.
Cops had heard the name James Fagoni before from their July 11th conversation with Larissa's manicurist, who told them about an August 2002 burglary involving Fagoni.
The year prior to Timothy's disappearance, Larissa had told the manicurist that she and this James Fagoni had broken into his place and taken back stuff that Larissa rightfully felt was hers.
Missing are some valuable items, to also include a notebook he was keeping about his interaction with his wife, as well as his custody issues involving his son. Now this book was missing.
Clovis, California, Monday, July 14th, 2003, 10 a.m. Detectives bring James Fagoni down to the station for questioning.
What do you think's going on?
I don't know. Larissa told me when she got back Friday night that he's missing. She didn't really say too much to me, so...
Was that the first you found out about it?
Yeah.
So detectives confront Fagoni about this burglary that he and Larissa supposedly committed. And he initially denies it.
She mentioned that he had been robbed. I thought maybe she had something to do with it, but...
What would give you that impression?
I don't know. She was happy about it.
The police say, take about 20 minutes, think about it, we'll be back. When the police walk back in the interview room, they more or less offer him a deal. They're not going to charge him with anything, but he has to fess up about that incident.
Subsequently, he breaks down and confesses that it was in fact both he and Larissa that did burglarize Timothy's house a year prior. Fagoni further states he has no idea where Timothy is at this point in time, but that he actually believes that Timothy is out to get him for some reason.
Meanwhile, as Larissa's employees learn of Tim's disappearance, they begin contacting the authorities. Tammy Belche, Larissa's best friend, tells police that after Larissa had been questioned, she started acting paranoid.
She was asking me things like, can they track me using my GPS? Just things that just someone who felt like, Big Brother was watching.
Police soon learned that on Saturday, July 12th, the day after Larissa met with detectives, she asked one of her co-workers to rent a U-Haul for her.
And it had to be a truck with a lift gate on the back because she's going to lift some kind of heavy equipment.
That co-worker, Leslie Dobbs, tells investigators that Larissa took the truck for about 50 minutes. Then the two of them returned it to U-Haul.
And when she turned it back in, Larissa was dirty, and some people even thought she had blood on her tennis shoes.
Did you ever ask her about how she got that blood on her shoe?
No, I did not.
When they look at the U-Haul mileage, there were only 15 miles on it.
So something was suspicious with that rental and the purpose for it.
Clovis, California, Monday, July 14th, 2003. Police obtained warrants to search Larissa Schuster's storage locker, residence, and biochemical lab, despite the fact she's away on vacation. The three searches, which take place over the course of 24 hours, yield a bounty of evidence.
During the search of her home, they find a pair of bloody tennis shoes, and they take them for evidence. Upon searching the laboratory, timesheets and invoices of James Fagoni are taken, as well as saws, a mop, and a bucket.
There are also a number of big Lysol air fresheners, which you would never have in a lab because they could possibly contaminate any kind of experiment.
In a dumpster behind the lab, police find 6 empty bottles of hydrochloric acid.
So obviously the aerosol was there to mask the scent of the hydrochloric acid.
Larissa's storage locker, number A182 at Security Public Storage, is last to be searched. As soon as a detective opens the unit, he's struck by an overwhelming stench.
The police find a large 55-gallon drum. Inside is the badly decomposing body of Timothy Schuster. Tissue samples from his body test positive for chloroform.
On the night of July 14, 2003, 3 days after Timothy Schuster is reported missing, police in Central California find his dead body submerged in a barrel of acid at a storage unit belonging to his ex-wife, Larissa. The following day, July 15th, detectives question Larissa's associate, James Fagoni, for the second time. Initially, he claimed ignorance about Tim's disappearance. Now that investigators know Tim was murdered and that his wife, Larissa, was almost certainly involved, they press Fagoni for more details.
One of the things that comes out is that prior to Timothy's disappearance, Larissa had asked him to acquire a stun gun, zip ties, and so forth.
On the morning of July 10th, Fagoni went with Larissa to Tim's house.
I heard some talking. I kind of stepped aside to where I could be seen. And then the door opened and I just ran up and we went inside.
As soon as Tim opens the door, Fagoni tackles him to the ground and zaps him with a stun gun.
You know what part of his body impacted him with it?
Just all over.
Once Tim is disabled, both Larissa and Fagoni tie him up and put him in the back of a truck and drive him over to Larissa's house.
Fagoni claims that Larissa then poured some kind of caustic substance all over her husband's body and closed the lid.
He was real like that, and I heard some noises like breathing, but I pretty much figured out, I don't think he's alive.
They then take him back over to the chemical lab that Larissa and Timothy had co-owned together.
Fagoni says that 2 days later, on Saturday, July 12th, Larissa asked him over dinner to help her move the body to a different location.
I told her I didn't want anything to do with it after that. And what she did from there, I don't really know.
It was at that point the police took Fagoni into custody for the murder of Timothy Schuster. Fagoni admitted that he was given an initial payment of $2,000 for being Larissa's helper, and then later he was given another $500 as a bonus.
St. Louis, Missouri, Wednesday, July 16th, 2003, 2:30 p.m. Larissa gets off a plane at St. Louis International Airport where she's visiting family before heading off to Disney World with her son. Detectives greet her there, armed with an arrest warrant.
Larissa expresses little surprise when she's arrested. The police find 2 receipts on her, one for the Lysol that was found in her lab, and the other for a bunch of air fresheners. They also found on Larissa the key card, which allowed her access to the storage unit.
Larissa's extradited back to California, where on July 18th, she and James Fagoni are charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances. That same day, police search James Fagoni's apartment. They find a receipt for the stun gun and bank receipts confirming Larissa's payments to him.
Forensic searches of Larissa's computer shown that she had earlier searched for issues related to how animal and human tissue digest.
You have hydrochloric acid, you have stun gun, which has been recovered. You have the statements of a participant, you've got a barrel, you've got a body, you've got everything you need.
On July 18, 2003, 43-year-old Larissa Schuster and her 21-year-old lackey, James Fagoni, are indicted in California on first-degree murder charges for killing Schuster's estranged husband, Timothy, with hydrochloric acid. During the lead-up to their separate trials, law enforcement sets out to prove that Larissa Schuster masterminded the grisly homicide. But who is she?
Larissa Foreman was born in January of 1960. She grew up on a farm in Clarence, Missouri. She later attended the University of Missouri, where she studied biochemistry.
During her studies at the university, she works as a nursing assistant at a facility, and that's where she meets Tim. Not too long after Larissa and Timothy meet, they're going to become married.
In 1998, Larissa opens her research lab, specializing in biochemistry for the agricultural community.
She was definitely the main breadwinner in the marriage. She outgrew him.
Apparently, Tim and Larissa fight over just about everything, especially parenting.
In 2002, Larissa files for divorce. Timothy subsequently moves out.
Still, the Schusters remain financially tied at the hip. Tim owns a significant share of Larissa's biochemical company. Prosecutors believe that's the reason she killed her husband.
If, in fact, the divorce was finalized, her ex-husband would have been rewarded 49% of her lab's worth. She apparently did not want to see that money going to her ex-husband.
Fresno, California, Monday, November 27th, 2006, 9 a.m. The murder trial of James Fagoni begins at Fresno County Superior Court. Fagoni takes the stand in his own defense.
He claims to have been manipulated by Larissa and, in fact, was fearful of Larissa.
The jury dismisses Fagoni's claims.
December 12, 2006, Fagoni is found guilty of murder, special circumstances.
2 months later, Fagoni is officially sentenced by the judge. It's life in prison without parole.
Van Nuys, California, Monday, October 22nd, 2007, 9 a.m. The murder trial of Larissa Schuster gets underway. James Fagoni doesn't testify, but Larissa herself takes the stand for 5 straight days.
She denied killing her husband. Larissa testified that when people heard her talk about her husband dying or being killed, or these voicemails that she left him, she never literally meant those things. She was only venting frustration.
I know that I made some bad decisions that day. I was simply overwhelmed with what was going on in my life.
Instead, Larissa's defense team pins the entire crime on James Fagoni.
James was the one that actually initiated the murder. He did it out of extreme loyalty to Larissa, that she was so shocked she saw the murder of her former husband that she failed to notify the police in a timely manner.
Through cross-examination by the prosecutor, much of Larissa's testimony was challenged. Much of it was found to be implausible.
December 12, 2007, Larissa is found guilty. Murder, special circumstances. She is sentenced to life without possibility of parole.
Manhattan, New York, Sunday, July 7th, 1985, 9:30 a.m. 29-year-old Dr. Robert Bierenbaum and his wife Gail are at home in their Upper East Side apartment getting ready for the day. Bob works long hours at Brooklyn's Maimonides Hospital as a surgical resident.
Gail Katz-Bierenbaum, who's also 29, is a clinical psychology student in the process of qualifying for a PhD program.
The Bierenbaums have been married for nearly 3 years. 10:11 a.m. Gail receives a call from a friend she hasn't spoken to in more than a year.
Gail is elated that perhaps his friend is calling to make amends, but the friend only wants a doctor referral from Bob. Gail gets angry, hangs up, then directs her fury towards her husband.
The Bierenbaum's downstairs neighbor hears yelling. Gail and Bob are screaming at each other.
Suddenly, the yelling stops. The neighbors hear the sounds of clacking heels or something similar to furniture scraping the floor. Then, there's a loud bang of a door slamming.
Around 6:30 that evening, Bob shows up at his nephew's birthday party in New Jersey without Gail. He tells everyone that she left that morning and hasn't returned and leaves it at that.
After the party, Bob goes to his friend Scott's house. He calls home twice but gets no answer. He explains to Scott that he and Gail had a fight and she left the apartment to go sunbathe in Central Park.
Bierenbaum returns home around 11:30 Sunday night. He calls his mother-in-law, Sylvia, to see if Gail's there at her parents' house in Long Island. Sylvia tells Bob she hasn't seen her daughter. He explains that Gail left the apartment that morning to cool off after they'd gotten into a fight, and he hasn't seen her since.
Bob is urged to file a missing persons report, but he doesn't and goes to bed.
By the following morning, Monday, July 8th, Gail still hasn't returned home.
When Bob calls his wife's personal psychologist, Dr. Sybil Baran, he learns that Gail never showed up for her regularly scheduled appointment that day.
Gail's been in treatment for a while because she has a history of mental illness. At one point, she had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. In 1979, when she was just 23 years old, Gail tried to kill herself and ended up hospitalized.
Bob tells Dr. Baran that Gail is missing and he's really concerned she might have harmed herself. Nevertheless, he still puts in a full day of work.
Manhattan, New York, Monday, July 8th, 1985, 9 p.m. Bob Bierenbaum walks into the NYPD's 19th precinct and finally reports his wife missing.
He tells police about their fight the previous morning, how Gail left the apartment around 11 a.m., and how he believes she went to Central Park to cool off. According to Bob, Gail took her wallet and her rings. She was wearing pink shorts and a white t-shirt.
A 2-hour search of Central Park yields no trace of Gail Katz Bierenbaum.
Gail's parents, Sylvia and Manny Katz, her younger brother Steve, and older sister Elaine spend the next several days searching the city and posting missing persons flyers.
Elaine and Gail are extremely close. Elaine knows that her sister's marriage had been rocky and Gail had been contemplating divorce.
Elaine also knows that Gail has been romantically involved with 2 men other than her husband. She finds her sister's phone book and calls both men, but neither has seen Gail.
Elaine begins to develop the sinking feeling that something terrible has happened to Gail and that her husband might be involved.
Elaine tells her parents that the relationship between Gail and Bob was far more volatile than Gail ever led them to believe.
Elaine tells her parents that back in August 1982, days before Bob and Gail's wedding, Gail called her sobbing hysterically because she caught Bob trying to strangle and drown her cat.
Elaine tells them about another incident in November 1983, when Bob turned violent against Gail. He'd come home early one night and caught her on the terrace, smoking, something he'd forbidden her to do.
He flies into a blind rage, throws his cigarettes off the balcony, and steps over the railing as though he's going to jump. When Gail gets angry in return, Bob chokes her to the point of unconsciousness before then reviving her. It's pretty evident to the Katz family that Gail has been in an abusive relationship with Bob Bierenbaum for a long time.
During the early stages of the missing persons investigation, the Katzes become fixtures at the Bierenbaum apartment.
Gail's family feels that Bob hasn't been that involved. They're getting suspicious. They just don't think he's that worried that his wife is missing.
At one point, Sylvia Katz is looking around the apartment when she finds Gail's purse.
Gail's wallet is inside along with her credit cards and cigarettes, items she would have never left the house without, especially if she was upset. Even stranger is the fact that Bob has said Gail took her wallet with her when she left.
On Wednesday, July 10th, more than 72 hours since anyone last saw or heard from Gail Katz Bierenbaum, Detective Thomas O'Malley calls Bob and asks him for a photo of his wife and access to her address book.
Bob agrees to turn over the items. During the call, he makes sure to mention that he spoke to the doorman of the building who claims he saw Gail leave on the morning of Sunday, July 7th.
Bob tells police everything a concerned husband should. But when Detective O'Malley calls the Katz family the following day, he learns all about the Bierenbaum's marital problems and Bob's temper. The Katzes also inform him of one specific lie they know Bierenbaum has been telling.
Like Bob, Elaine Katz had talked to the doorman. He told her that he last saw Gail on Saturday, not Sunday like Bob was claiming. This means Bob was likely the last person to see Gail alive.
NYPD 19th Precinct, Saturday, July 13th, 1985. Police questioned Bob Bierenbaum for the second time.
Detective O'Malley asked Bob what time the doorman saw Gail on Sunday, the 7th. Bob now admits he misspoke and that the doorman had actually seen Gail Saturday, the day before she vanished.
Bob readily admits that his marriage to Gail was troubled and that they've been in therapy. Yet, he denies knowing anything about Gail's extramarital affairs.
O'Malley presses Bob, asking him point blank if he's ever strangled his wife.
Bob says he doesn't want to talk about it, but does admit that when he caught Gail smoking, it really upset him.
According to Bob, Gail was depressed and suicidal, perhaps more so in the weeks leading up to her disappearance because she'd been working on a paper about depression as it was part of her psychology coursework.
The officers ask Bob to walk them through his schedule from Sunday, July 7th. There's a near 7-hour gap in Bierenbaum's timeline where no one can vouch for his whereabouts.
Bob claims he was alone in the apartment from 11 a.m. when he says Gail went to Central Park, until the time he left for his nephew's birthday party, which police concluded was around 5:30 p.m.
Detective O'Malley starts to speculate that this missing persons case could actually be a murder case and that Bierenbaum might be involved.
On July 7th, 1985, 29-year-old Gail Katz Bierenbaum goes missing from her Upper East Side Manhattan apartment. Both her family and law enforcement have strong suspicions that her husband, Dr. Robert Bierenbaum, might have played some role in her disappearance. As his wife's missing persons investigation goes into week 2, Bob Bierenbaum stops actively assisting law enforcement.
He doesn't return at least 8 calls from police. He also ignores a request to look around the apartment. Instead, he hires a criminal defense attorney and shuts down all communication.
East Hampton, New York, Wednesday, August 7th, 1985. Bob Bierenbaum rents a plane at the local airport.
Bob's an avid pilot, so this isn't unusual. But what is unusual is his flight logbook. There's an entry dated July 7th, the day his wife went missing, but oddly, no details had been filled in at the time. Bob always meticulously filled out his flight logs.
Now, on August 7th, instead of making a new entry dated August 7th, Bob writes over the July 7th entry and fills it in with the data from his current flight.
Despite the authorities' suspicions, Dr. Bierenbaum doesn't maintain a low profile.
Bob had started dating an anesthesiologist named Roberta Karnofsky. In September 1985, he asked Roberta to move into the 85th Street apartment.
Roberta accepts, yet all of Gail's things are still there.
Soon, Bob tells his new girlfriend his latest theory about what happened to his wife.
Bob tells Roberta he thinks Gail might be wandering around Manhattan in a fugue state, a rare psychotic disorder where someone has amnesia regarding his or her own identity.
In October 1985, Elaine Katz stops by the 85th Street apartment to pick up Gail's things.
She's shocked to discover that Bob has put her sister's things in big trash bags, as if they were going to be thrown out.
Elaine becomes irate. She directly accuses Bob of murdering Gail, saying, "You killed my sister." Bob responds by saying that Gail was a tramp and probably off living with some other guy.
Despite the argument, 9 more months will pass without any movement in Gail's case.
New York, New York, Wednesday, July 2nd, 1986, 2 a.m. Bob Bierenbaum and his girlfriend Roberta are awakened by an unexpected call from the Port Authority police.
They tell Bierenbaum there's a disoriented woman at the bus station that could be Gail, and they needed him to come down and identify her. Bob immediately asks if it's really necessary for him to do this right now, like he's annoyed.
Bob tells Roberta he doubts that it's Gail, but leaves anyway.
When he returns to the apartment around 3:40 a.m., he tells Roberta the woman wasn't Gail and goes right back to sleep.
Roberta remains deeply troubled by Bob's behavior. He seemed too confident that it wasn't going to be his wife, and she's never known him to even make the effort and go out and look for Gail.
Roberta expresses her concerns about Bob to a friend who stays at the apartment for a few days. The two women start to develop a theory that Bierenbaum actually killed his wife, stuffed her dead body into one of his many duffel bags, then piloted a solo flight and dumped it from the air.
Roberta and her friends sneak into Bob's home office and check his flight book. They see an entry for 7-7, which has been written over in a different color ink to read 8-7. Roberta doesn't say anything to anyone at the time.
Then, one night at dinner, Roberta confronts Bob.
She tells Bob her hypothesis that he dumped Gail's dead body out of a plane. He simply stares down at his plate.
By August 1986, 13 months into their investigation of Gail Katz Bierenbaum's mysterious disappearance, police in New York City continue to suspect her husband, Dr. Robert Bierenbaum, is involved. By summer's end, the NYPD assigns 2 new detectives, veteran Andy Rosenzweig and rookie Hope Whitman, to the missing persons case.
The new investigators learn something the old investigators never knew, that Bob has a pilot's license, and he flies regularly.
Detective Whitman canvasses local airports, checking the flight logs for July 7, 1985, the day Gail vanished.
Whitman hits pay dirt at Caldwell Airport, which is located in Essex County, New Jersey.
She finds an entry indicating that Bob rented a Cessna on July 7, 1985, between 4:30 and 6:25 p.m.
This means Bob had taken the Cessna up before he'd gone to his nephew's birthday party in Upper Montclair, New Jersey, which happens to be just under 7 miles away from Caldwell Airport.
Bierenbaum had never mentioned in any of his interviews with law enforcement that he had gone flying on the day of his wife's disappearance.
Fairfield, New Jersey, Wednesday, February 4th, 1987. Police search the Cessna Bob had rented 19 months earlier. They don't find anything connecting the plane to Gail Bierenbaum.
2 months later, in April 1987, the DA's office officially closes the Gail Katz Bierenbaum missing persons case. Law enforcement simply doesn't have the evidence to indict Bob Bierenbaum for any crime.
The Katz family have to wait 2 more years for a new development to take place.
Staten Island, New York, Sunday, May 21st, 1989, 10 a.m. Police find a female torso floating in Upper New York Bay. An X-ray is ordered, even though the torso looks like it's only been in the water for 6 months.
Medical examiners find irregularities on the right rib bone, which they believe confirms the torso belongs to Gail Bierenbaum.
Gail's family is shocked. They find it hard to believe it's Gail, but on August 31st, 1989, they have a funeral and bury the torso for emotional closure.
Soon, Bob Bierenbaum moves permanently from New York to Las Vegas, Nevada, after accepting a job at the University Medical Center.
Since his live-in girlfriend, Dr. Roberta Karnofsky, broke up with him, he's been living the life of a successful single surgeon.
Bierenbaum dates around, but he can't outrun the questions about his past. When new love interest asks about Gail's disappearance, he tells them how she was depressed or how she probably ran off with one of her drug friends.
In the spring of 1996, Bierenbaum moves to Minot, North Dakota with the new woman he's dating, OBGYN Dr. Janet Cholet.
Bob and Janet marry in June 1996 after just 3 months of dating. Bob quickly settles into his role as a popular local plastic surgeon with a good guy reputation.
Meanwhile, back in New York, veteran detective Andy Rosenzweig is preparing to retire. In December 1997, he takes one final crack at the Gail Katz Bierenbaum cold case.
Rosenzweig learns about the torso that floated up in Staten Island in 1989. He gets permission from the Katz family to exhume it.
With advancements in DNA technology, police are able to perform genetic tests on the torso. The results are conclusive. It's not Gail.
Detective Rosenzweig decides to really start digging into Bob Bierenbaum's life.
First, Rosenzweig and another investigator head to Vegas. There, they learn that Bierenbaum continued to tell conflicting stories of what happened to his first wife.
In the fall of 1998, the detectives land in Minot, North Dakota. A friend tips Bob off that they're asking questions about him around town, and Bierenbaum is displeased, especially since he and his wife just had a baby girl.
On November 30th, 1998, Rosenzweig and his partner approach Bierenbaum as he leaves the medical facility where he works.
They ask him if he'll assist them in the current investigation. He refers them to his lawyer.
Snubbed by Bierenbaum, the detectives track down his old girlfriend, Roberta Karnofsky.
Roberta tells them about the night Bob received a 2 a.m. phone call to identify a woman at the Port Authority bus station. She explains how alarmingly sure he was that it wasn't Gail.
Karnofsky tells them about Bob's flight log and how she and a girlfriend saw that he'd altered the July 7th date in different colored ink.
She also tells him her theory that he killed Gail and dumped her body out of the plane.
In September 1999, with all the new information detectives have gathered against Bob Bierenbaum, the DA decides to convene a grand jury.
New York, New York, Monday, December 8th, 1999. Robert Bierenbaum arrives in Manhattan. He's arraigned for the second-degree murder of his first wife, Gail. In December 1999, 14 years after his wife Gail went missing in New York City under suspicious circumstances, Dr. Robert Bierenbaum is indicted for her second-degree murder. As prosecutors build their case against Bierenbaum, they find out he isn't the poster child most people believe him to be.
First, there's the August 1982 incident, when Gail wakes up in the middle of the night to find Bob strangling her cat over the toilet. Then, in November 1983, there's the incident where Bob catches Gail smoking on the balcony terrace of their 12th floor apartment. Bob allegedly chokes Gail to the point she passes out and has to revive her.
Gail did file a police report 4 days after that incident, but she stays with Bob after he agrees to go to counseling.
Bob is eventually referred to a psychiatrist, Dr. Michael Stone. Stone decides Bierenbaum is so dangerous that he drafts what's called a Tarasoff letter, expressing his ethical, medical, and legal duty to warn Gail for her own protection.
Dr. Stone's advice to Gail: live apart from Bob or face the consequences, which might include death at her husband's hands. Gail doesn't sign the Tarasoff letter, but she keeps extra copies, storing them alongside a copy of the police report from the choking incident.
By late 1984, Gail consults an attorney about divorcing Bob and the demands she'd want from a divorce.
By July 1985, Gail saved enough money to leave Bob. Just prior to their final confrontation on the morning of July 7th, Gail tells a friend she's going to threaten to expose the Tarasoff letter to Bob's professional contacts, which would destroy him. Days later, she vanishes without a trace.
Prosecutors believe this is the reason Bob Bierenbaum killed his wife and disappeared her body.
The prosecution's case is built around motive because they have no body, they have no forensic evidence.
New York, New York, Monday, October 2nd, 2000. The Bob Bierenbaum murder trial gets underway at New York Criminal Court.
The prosecution contends that Bob and Gail were in a miserable marriage, which ended at a flashpoint of rage because Gail intended to leave and threaten Bob.
the state presents a video demonstrating how Bob Bierenbaum could have disposed of his wife.
In the video, a police pilot takes the same kind of plane up in the air from the same airport where Bierenbaum flew on July 7, 1985.
While the plane is in the air, the pilot successfully dumps a bag of rice and sand weighing the same as Gail, 110 pounds, out of the plane by himself.
Bierenbaum's defense team argues that all the prosecution has is theory and not one shred of hard evidence. While true, the jury disagrees.
On October 24, 2000, the jury convicts Bob Bierenbaum of the second-degree murder of his wife, Gail. A month later, he's sentenced to 20 years to life in prison.
Woodruff, South Carolina, Sunday, October 9th, 2011, 11:30 a.m. 48-year-old landscaper Scott Davis is on the computer, searching Craigslist employment ads.
Davis comes across a posting for an on-site caretaker position at a cattle farm in Ohio, which happens to be close to where his sick mother lives.
The job offers $300 a week and a 2-bedroom trailer to live in, which is tailor-made for Davis's situation.
Davis responds to the email address associated with the ad.
Several days later, Scott receives a response from a man named Jack.
Davis is offered the job sight unseen. He's told that it would be a plus if he can bring his own truck and equipment with him.
On November 5th, Scott packs up all of his belongings, including a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and hits the road. Marietta, Ohio, Sunday, November 6th, 2011, 9:40 a.m. Scott Davis arrives at Shoney's Diner. He meets with his new employer, Jack, who's brought along a teenager named Brogan, who he says is his nephew.
They discuss the caretaker job over breakfast, and then they all go out to Scott's truck to inventory his belongings.
The trio gets in Brogan's Buick and heads out to rural Caldwell, Ohio.
As they near the farm, Jack explains that he needs to retrieve some equipment that he's hidden in the woods. He tells Brogan to pull over.
Brogan stays behind at the car as Jack and Scott disappear into the woods.
They don't find any equipment, so Jack suggests they take another route.
Scott turns to look in the other direction, and as soon as he does, Jack walks up behind him.
All of a sudden, Scott hears the loud click of a gun cocking.
Scott Davis swings around and finds himself staring down the barrel of a gun.
Instinctively, he covers his face with his hands. Jack shoots, but the gun misfires, clipping Scott in the elbow instead of the head.
Davis takes off running. Jack chases after him, firing the gun repeatedly.
He manages to cross a road into another set of woods and finds a good hiding spot in the underbrush near a creek.
He remains in that spot until sunset.
Around 7:30 that night, after walking for miles, Scott sees a house with its lights on. He rings the doorbell in a panic.
Sheriff Adams' office. Hey, yes, we just had a gentleman come up to our front door. He claims that he's been shot. He's got some blood on him. What's your name, sir? Scott Davis. Sir, do you need an ambulance or anything right now? Or you need...
Please come pick me up.
Yeah, so if you can have somebody come up here ASAP.
The Noble County Sheriff Stephen Hannum arrives on the scene. He photographs Davis' injuries, then listens to a story about the man named Jack who hired him to take care of his 688-acre farm.
Sheriff Hannum finds Davis' story a little fishy. The likelier story in the sheriff's mind is that Scott was involved in a drug deal gone bad.
The sheriff knows the area where Davis claims he was attacked is part of land owned by local biker Jerry Hood Sr., who's suspected of having drug connections.
Davis is taken to Akron General Medical Center, where he'll spend the next 5 days recovering from surgery on his arm. In the meantime, Sheriff Hannum attempts to verify Davis's unbelievable story.
The sheriff learns that the U.S. Marshals have Jerry Hood Sr.'s farm under surveillance, believing that one of Hood's known associates, Richard Beasley, might be staying there. There's an arrest warrant out for Beasley because of a parole violation.
The day after the shooting, Monday, November 7th, the Noble County Sheriffs obtained security footage from Shoney's.
In the footage, it's clear that Scott Davis is with a heavy-set white male and a younger white male who match his descriptions of Jack and his nephew Brogan.
The next day, Detective Jason Mackey and an agent from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation visit the area on Don Warner Road, where Scott Davis claims he was ambushed.
They find Davis's hat in a stream, which further corroborates his account. At this point, they contact the local FBI field office and ask for further assistance in the investigation.
As soon as Davis is released from the hospital on November 10th, he meets with FBI agents in Akron.
The agents show Scott a bunch of photographs. Davis can't identify the older man, but he positively IDs the teenager, a 16-year-old named Brogan Rafferty.
Caldwell, Ohio, Friday, November 11th, 2011, 4 p.m. Detective Mackey receives a call from a woman named Deborah Bruce. She tells him her twin brother, David Pauly, is missing.
According to Deborah, her brother just landed a job via Craigslist as a caretaker for a cattle farm in rural Ohio.
Deborah tells Detective Mackey that 3 weeks earlier, on October 22nd, David rented a U-Haul in Virginia, packed up all his possessions, and made the drive to Caldwell.
She explains that David called her from the road, and that was the last time she'd heard from him.
The U-Haul was returned 2 days later, but not by David Pauly.
She's bringing her brother up to Noble County's attention now because she came across a story about Scott Davis, who'd accepted a similar Ohio caretaker job to her brother's.
Deborah forwards a series of email exchanges between her brother and his new employer, Jack, to Detective Mackey.
An FBI cybercrime specialist looks at the Craigslist ads and discovers that Scott Davis and David Pauly both responded to Jack's ad on October 9th. The following day, October 10th, 2 other men responded, Dan DeWalt and Timothy Kern.
All of the Craigslist ads were posted from the same IP address, which is associated with a man named Joe Bias who lives in Akron, Ohio.
Akron, Ohio, Monday, November 14th, 2011. FBI agents visit Joe Bias at home to question him about the Craigslist ads.
Bias informs investigators that back in August, he rented a room to a man named Ralph Geiger, whose nickname is Dutch. Bias says Dutch often used his laptops at the house. According to Bias, Dutch wanted another laptop from him. Because he was short on cash, Dutch traded Bias a bunch of random objects for it: ammo cases, Christmas lights, and a train.
Some of the items appear to belong to David Pauly.
Investigators ask Bias to ID his one-time lodger from a series of photos.
Bias picks the picture of the man he thinks is Ralph Geiger, aka Dutch, but he's actually identifying an ex-convict named Richard Beasley.
Richard Beasley's the fugitive U.S. Marshals believe might be hiding out at Jerry Hood Sr.'s farm.
Bias calls Richard Beasley at the authorities' request.
He manages to keep Beasley on the phone long enough for law enforcement to trace him to a home on Gridley Avenue in Akron.
Later that day, detectives talk to Richard Beasley's ex-wife, Tina.
Tina deeply fears Richard, who used to threaten to kill her, then bury her body on Jerry Hood's farm, where she'd never be found.
Investigators show Tina a picture from the Shoney's surveillance tape. She positively identifies her ex. Authorities are now certain that Scott Davis's Jack and Joe Bias's Ralph Geiger are without a doubt ex-con Richard Beasley.
In November 2011, 48-year-old Scott Davis is shot and chased through the woods of rural Ohio by a man who lured him there via Craigslist with a job prospect. Authorities quickly learned that 3 weeks earlier, 51-year-old David Pauly went missing after he responded to a Craigslist ad.
With the FBI's help, the Noble County sheriffs now know that Scott Davis and David Pauly responded to the same ad, which had been posted by ex-con Richard Beasley.
Caldwell, Ohio, Monday, November 14th, 2011. A team of law enforcement officials returned to the area on Don Warner Road where Scott Davis was attacked.
They find 3 hand-dug holes. One is several feet deep and approximately 80 inches long, roughly the size of a grave.
The following day, officers return to the scene with cadaver dogs who find a shallow grave. They excavate the area and unearth the decomposed remains of a white male.
A piece of jewelry found on the body belongs to missing person David Pauly. An autopsy confirms Pauly's identity and reveals that he died from a gunshot wound to the head 2 to 3 weeks earlier.
Now, With a homicide on their hands, investigators re-interview Richard Beasley's ex-wife, Tina.
Tina confirms that Richard and 16-year-old Brogan Rafferty have a close relationship. She also mentions that Richard used to steal people's driver's licenses and reapply for new social security numbers. This suggests identity theft may have been the motive behind David Pauly's murder.
Akron, Ohio, Wednesday, November 16, 2011. A SWAT team descends on the address where the FBI geolocated Richard Beasley. They take him into custody without incident.
Investigators search the room that Beasley's renting and find several items belonging to David Pauly. They also find documents and prescription bottles, all in the name of Ralph Geiger.
Stowe, Ohio, Wednesday, November 16, 2011. FBI agents execute a search warrant on the home of 16-year-old Brogan Rafferty, Richard Beasley's supposed accomplice.
They find a briefcase containing a .22 caliber Iver Johnson pistol, items belonging to David Pauly, and a poem written by Brogan on his computer that appears to chronicle the death of the real Ralph Geiger.
Simultaneously, officers arrive at Stowe Monroe Falls High School and take Rafferty into custody. They drive him home so he can be questioned in the presence of his parents.
Brogan readily admits to meeting David Pauly and Scott Davis, but denies involvement in anything that happened in the woods.
The agents confront Rafferty with a picture of a pre-dug makeshift grave, which Richard Beasley, who'd been disabled in a car accident, most likely could not have dug himself. Rafferty then admits that he dug the hole at Beasley's command, but didn't know what it was for.
The authorities believe there's much more to the story than Rafferty's telling them, so they arrest him and take him to the local jail.
Noble County Sheriff's Office, Thursday, November 17, 2011, 8:55 a.m. Detective Jason Mackey interviews Brogan Rafferty.
After Mackey confronts Rafferty with the evidence they have against him, Brogan admits to being more involved in the crimes against Scott Davis and David Pauly.
Brutal honesty is all we can ask, okay? When Mr. Pauly was shot, were you present?
No, sir.
Did you help put him in the hole or cover him up?
I put him in the hole, or helped put him in the hole.
In mid-November 2011, 52-year-old ex-con Richard Beasley and his 16-year-old sidekick Brogan Rafferty are arrested for the murder of David Pauly and the attempted murder of Scott Davis. Authorities allege that Beasley posted a bogus job listing on Craigslist to lure both men to southeastern Ohio so he could rob them of their possessions and potentially steal their identities.
Police discovered there were two other men who responded to Beasley's Craigslist ad, Dan DeWalt and Tim Kern. They interviewed DeWalt but have been unable to locate Kern.
Finally, on November 20th, Tina Kern contacts the FBI and tells them that her ex-husband Tim has been missing for about a week.
Tina explains that Tim had been unemployed and often used her computer to look for work. While doing so, he came across a great opportunity online.
According to Tina, Tim told her he went to a Waffle House in Akron, Ohio on November 7th to meet a prospective employer named Ron.
Apparently, Ron offered Tim the job, but one of the conditions was that Tim transfer the title of his car over to him.
On the night of November 12th, Tim Kern visited his ex-wife and their sons before heading off to his new job. That was the last time he'd been seen by his family. Law enforcement is building strong cases against Beasley for the Davis, Pauly, and Kern incidents, but they need Brogan Rafferty's cooperation to bring it home.
Investigators offer Rafferty a deal if he agrees to tell them everything and testifies against Richard Beasley in open court.
Caldwell, Ohio, Wednesday, November 23, 2011, 11 a.m. Brogan Rafferty gives a taped confession to Noble County Sheriff's detectives.
Rafferty starts by telling detectives about the real Ralph Geiger. Back in August 2011, Richard Beasley, who'd been in prison on drug and prostitution charges, got out on bond. Fearing that he'd be sent back to jail, Beasley wanted a new identity. Geiger looked similar enough to fit the bill.
Geiger was living in a homeless shelter when Beasley offered him a job that he believed would put him back on his feet.
Beasley and Geiger met at the Best Western in Caldwell on Monday, August 8, 2011.
The following morning, Beasley takes Geiger into the woods and shoots him.
Mr. Beasley pulled a pistol out and pointed it at the back of Mr. Geiger's head. I closed my eyes and then I heard a gunshot and I opened them. Mr. Geiger was in the creek bed.
Did he seem to be dead?
Yes, he was dead. I'm pretty sure.
Rafferty helps dig a grave and tosses Geiger's body into it. Before they bury Geiger, they steal his identifying documents.
10 weeks later, on October 23rd, Beasley and Rafferty dig a hole off Don Warner Road, then meet up with David Pauly for breakfast.
Rafferty explains that once they got Pauly out in a remote wooded area, he left to use the bathroom. Then he heard a loud crack and saw Pauly fall down dead.
Rafferty claims he and Beasley buried Pauly in the pre-dug hole. According to Rafferty, by the time they set up Scott Davis, he's fully aware that Beasley's soliciting people on Craigslist with fake job offers.
Apparently, Beasley believes Scott Davis was the ultimate mark.
Beasley was excited because it was supposed to be a pretty big load of stuff. I think there was supposed to be a motorcycle, and we had a lot of his equipment with him. It was going to be worth some money.
How much money do you think it was worth, Beasley?
I think he said something like $30,000.
According to Rafferty, Beasley's final target, Tim Kern, didn't have much. A car on its last legs, an old TV, and $5 in cash. But Beasley decides to move forward regardless.
Rafferty says he and Beasley met Tim at Italo's Pizza in Canton. They left Kern's car there and drove together out to the farm.
I heard a pop, and I turn around, and Mr. Kern is on his knees, kind of holding the side of his head. And Beasley is saying to him, "Are you all right?" And then Kern doesn't respond.
Beasley then shot Kern several more times.
I think he shot him 3 times in the head, but there was something wrong with the gun. So Beasley went up and got the gun close to him, and I turned around because I didn't want to see him, and he shot him again.
On November 25th, 2 days after Brogan Rafferty's confession, investigators returned to Don Warner Road.
About 150 feet from where they originally found Scott Davis's hat, authorities dig up a body that has a gunshot wound to the back of the head.
Dental records confirm it's Ralph Geiger.
Now that Beasley's first victim has been found, police focus on finding his last, Tim Kern.
Crime scene investigators search the woods behind the Rolling Acres Mall. They find a shallow grave with Tim Kern's body inside.
By late November 2011, police in southeastern Ohio have finally found the bodies of Ralph Geiger, David Pauly, and Tim Kern, who were all shot to death by 52-year-old ex-con Richard Beasley. Investigators have a full-tape confession from Beasley's 16-year-old accomplice, Brogan Rafferty, outlining exactly how the murders went down. Yet, that December, Rafferty's plea deal falls apart.
On December 15, 2011, the court decides to try Brogan Rafferty as an adult. He's charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, and a multitude of other charges.
1 month later, in January 2012, a grand jury indicts Richard Beasley for the murders of Ralph Geiger, David Pauly, and Timothy Kern, as well as the attempted murder of Scott Davis.
Beasley pleads not guilty to all the charges.
Who exactly is Richard Beasley?
Richard Beasley is born in 1959. He grows up with a religious mother. Beasley's apparently abused by his stepfather and bullied by kids in the neighborhood. By the mid-'80s, Richard's committing burglaries and having multiple run-ins with the law. He's incarcerated in Texas State Prison from 1985 to 1990, then federal prison from 1996 to 2003.
In 2004, Beasley reconnects with religion.
He moves to Ohio and becomes a street preacher known as Chaplain Rich, but remains involved in the Brothers Motorcycle Club. That's how he becomes acquainted with Mike Rafferty, who runs with a rival club.
Mike's son Brogan is about 8 when he expresses an interest in going to church. So Mike sends him with Richard Beasley.
Brogan gravitates to Beasley.
After a debilitating car accident, Beasley becomes dependent on painkillers. In 2009, he takes his financial settlement from the accident and opens up a halfway house.
But soon, Beasley allegedly prostitutes some of the female residents and deals illegal drugs.
Beasley's arrested yet again in February of 2011. He's released on bond in July, but the state of Texas files a warrant against him for a parole violation.
Beasley makes plans to go on the run, but needs a new identity. That's when he implores his protege, Brogan, to help him steal Ralph Geiger's identity.
Summit County, Ohio. Friday, October 12, 2012. The Brogan Rafferty trial gets underway at the Common Pleas Court.
Rafferty is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Summit County, Ohio. Monday, February 25, 2013. Richard Beasley stands trial.
The defense only calls 4 witnesses to the stand, including Richard Beasley himself.
Beasley doesn't admit to killing anyone.
On March 13, 2013, Richard Beasley is convicted of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and over 20 additional charges. A month later, the judge sentences Beasley to death.
Richard Beasley is to greed what Charles Manson is to insanity. He horribly manipulated Brogan Rafferty into doing his bidding. And Brogan Rafferty appears to be just a victim of his malice and callousness.
Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Tuesday, November 1st, 1994, 6 p.m. 53-year-old Rabbi Fred Neulander shares a pizza dinner with his 21-year-old son, Matthew. His wife won't be home till late, and their other two children, Rebecca and Ben, live out of town.
The Neulanders are a successful upper-middle-class family. Rabbi Neulander draws a six-figure salary from nearby Makor Shalom Synagogue, which he founded.
52-year-old Carol Neulander founded her own company, a bakery called Classic Cakes, back in 1990. She later sold the company, but returned to manage it.
That night, Carol is actually attending an after-hours staff meeting.
At 6:45 p.m., Matthew Neulander heads to a local ambulance company for his 12-hour EMT shift.
Fred changes into a suit and heads to Makor Shalom to check in on the night's activities. The week prior was the first time in a year that Neulander had taken a renewed interest in attending Tuesday night classes.
Fred spends nearly 2 hours at the synagogue.
Rabbi Neulander leaves the temple at 8:50 p.m. He pulls into his driveway at 9:19.
As soon as the rabbi opens the front door, he notices 2 spots of blood on the hardwood floor.
Neulander follows the blood trail. At the end of it, he finds Carol, his wife of nearly 29 years, lying face down on the living room floor.
It appears that Carol has been savagely beaten. Instead of rendering assistance to his wife, Rabbi Fred immediately picks up a cordless phone and dials 911.
I just came home. My wife is on the floor, and there's blood all over her. I don't know what to do.
Matthew, who's on duty, recognizes his home address as the call comes out over the radio. He races home.
First responders from the Cherry Hill Police Department and Camden County Prosecutor's Office show up at 9:30.
They locate Fred by the garage, but he isn't crying and doesn't appear to be too distressed.
One of the officers enters the house.
He finds Carol's severely battered body on the floor. It's obvious she's dead, so the officer tapes the area to secure the homicide scene.
He conducts an initial walkthrough of the home, but doesn't find any signs of forced entry.
Matthew Neulander arrives within minutes. When police don't allow him to enter the house, his EMT friends have to physically restrain him.
Matthew soon realizes that the reason he's not allowed inside is because his mother is dead. Overcome with grief, he walks away. Fred does not follow or attempt to comfort his son.
Fred calls his 24-year-old daughter, Rebecca, who lives 20 minutes away in Philadelphia.
Fred tells his daughter there's been an accident. He never says what kind of accident, but Rebecca figures it out during the ride home, that her mother is dead, and she's devastated.
Fred also makes arrangements for his youngest son, 19-year-old Ben, to fly home from Michigan, where he's attending college.
Word spreads quickly among the congregants of Makor Shalom that Rabbi Neulander's wife has possibly been murdered.
Neulander's closest friends come by that night to offer sympathy. Because police aren't allowing anyone inside the residence, they gather together inside the paramedic van.
While the friends are shaking and traumatized, Fred still appears very calm. One of the women asks him what he thinks happened. Fred makes the offhanded comment that it was the Colombians at the bakery.
Fred implies that Carol had been killed during a robbery, and she shouldn't have been carrying so much money home from the bakery in her purse.
As soon as Rebecca arrives from Philly, she gets into the EMT van with her father, brother, and an investigator from the Camden County Prosecutor's Office.
Rebecca tells the investigator that exactly 1 week prior, a man came over to the house claiming to have a package to deliver to Fred. The man asked to use the bathroom and then left. Rebecca and her mother subsequently named the visitor the bathroom man.
Rebecca explains that she'd been on the phone with her mother earlier that night when the bathroom man showed up again. According to what Rebecca could hear, her mother apparently invited the man inside again, although this time it seemed like he was accompanied by another person.
Cherry Hill Police Department, Wednesday, November 2nd, 1994, 1 a.m. Fred, Matthew, and Rebecca Neulander arrive at the station house for questioning.
Detectives speak with Rebecca first, then Matt.
Investigators finally sit down with Fred Neulander at 3:20 a.m.
The rabbi has nothing but positive things to say about his relationship with his wife.
Fred volunteers that there's never been any infidelity on either side and that they've never been to marriage counseling. He also declares that there's absolutely no ongoing hostility between himself and his wife.
Yet, during his interview, Matthew indicated that his parents recently got into an intense argument.
Matthew tells detectives that just 2 nights prior, his parents stormed into the house together at 10 o'clock. His mother then told him to say goodbye to his father because Fred was going to be moving out of the house for good.
At one point, Carol turned to Fred and asked if he wanted to work things out or end the marriage. Fred apparently replied, "It's over." According to Matthew, his mother then grabbed some suitcases, threw them at his father, and told Fred to get out.
A few hours later, it appeared as though the argument had blown over, which left Matthew completely dumbfounded.
During their Q&A with Rebecca, detectives learned additional details about the so-called bathroom man.
Rebecca explains that on the night of October 25th, she was chatting on the phone with her mother as Carol drove home from her usual Tuesday after-hours staff meeting at the bakery.
That night, after Carol pulled into the driveway, she remained in the car for a moment to finish the call when a man tapped on the window.
According to Rebecca, her mother believed that it was a delivery man Fred had told her would be stopping by the house to drop something off. Rebecca asked her mom if she wanted to stay on the phone, but her mother had said it's fine and hung up the car phone to go inside.
As it was cold outside and Fred wasn't yet home, Carol had invited the man into their house. Once inside, the man had asked to use the bathroom.
Rebecca tells the investigators that after the guy left, her mother called back and told her the man left behind an open envelope that night, but there was nothing inside.
Rebecca was instantly suspicious when the bathroom guy showed up again earlier that evening. She also really didn't like the fact that her mother invited him inside the house again, especially considering there was another person with him. She'd heard her mother tell the bathroom man to invite his friend in because it was cold outside.
Detectives had asked Fred Neulander if he'd been expecting a visitor either of the past 2 Tuesdays, as Rebecca had told them.
Fred tells police he never told Carol to expect any delivery or delivery person the previous Tuesday, though he claims Carol told him after the fact that a man had come over.
On November 1st, 1994, New Jersey Rabbi Fred Neulander arrives home to find his wife Carol bludgeoned to death on their living room floor. Fred, who's oddly cool and collected in the aftermath of the murder, puts forward the theory that his wife had been killed in a botched robbery. During their search of the Neulanders' residence, police were able to determine that Carol's burgundy purse is missing.
Investigators speak with several employees from Classic Cakes to determine if, like Fred Neulander suggested, one of them might have killed Carol in a robbery attempt. None of the staff seems particularly suspicious.
On Thursday, November 3rd, the Neulanders begin observing Shiva, the traditional Jewish period of mourning following a familial death.
They receive hundreds of visitors. Many of these guests notice that instead of exhibiting intense grief, Fred appears to be upbeat. Neulander apparently cracks jokes and tells friends that the police will never find out who killed Carol.
In the meantime, the Cherry Hill police take a closer look at the Neulanders' marriage.
Police also receive a few anonymous phone calls alleging that the good rabbi is having multiple affairs, including that he's recently been involved with Philadelphia radio host Elaine Sonsini.
Detectives pull Neulander's phone records in mid-November and confirm that he called Sonsini numerous times, including the day after his wife's murder.
They stake out Sonsini's house. Eventually, they record Rabbi Neulander pulling his car into her garage.
Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Monday, December 5th, 1994. Detectives interview Elaine Sonsini at the police station.
Sonsini outright denies having an affair with Fred Neulander. She claims they met in December of 1992 when her husband, Ken, was dying of leukemia, and the rabbi grief counseled her at the hospital.
The detectives confront Sonsini with the phone records. Sonsini sticks to her denial and is allowed to leave the station.
Yet, the following morning, Sonsini decides she wants to speak to police again.
This time, Elaine admits that she and Fred Neulander were having an affair. Apparently, less than a week after her husband's death, Neulander asked her out to lunch and kissed her. 3 days after that, they got even more intimate.
Apparently, after just 3 months, the rabbi declared his love for Elaine and told her he planned on divorcing his wife.
During the summer of 1994, after more than a year of sneaking around, she gave Fred an ultimatum. They needed to be together for real by January 1st, 1995, or she planned to move on. Neulander allegedly promised they'd be together by her birthday, December 17th.
According to Sonsini, Neulander told her he had a premonition his wife would be a victim of violence. Then, just weeks before the murder, Fred casually told Elaine that he wished Carol would just vanish and that maybe her car could just go into the river.
Sonsini leaves investigators with one final morsel, that Rabbi Neulander proposed to her just after the family finished observing Shiva. She balked.
Elaine ends up telling Neulander to stop. She ends up in a relationship with a Cherry Hill police officer assigned to protect her from him.
In January 1995, detectives convinced Sonsini to call Neulander while they listen in.
Police record the eventual phone conversation between Sonsini and Neulander. She repeatedly tries to get him to confess that he killed Carol, but he fervently denies anything to do with her death.
By late January 1995, nearly 3 months after Carol Neulander is savagely beaten to death in her home, police in Cherry Hill, New Jersey are investigating her husband, Rabbi Fred Neulander, as a person of interest. After questioning Neulander's longtime mistress, Elaine Sonsini, detectives learned the rabbi made some disturbing comments prior to his wife's death about wishing she was dead and gone. In the spring of 1995, after the tabloids highlight Rabbi Neulander's extramarital indiscretions, a man named Myron Pepe Levin contacts police.
Pepe and Fred Neulander played racquetball together. According to Pepe, Fred shamelessly discussed his affairs and told him he was contemplating a divorce from Carol.
In September 1994, 1 month before Carol's murder, Pepe claims Fred got angry after a racquetball match and told him he wished he could come home and find Carol dead on the floor, and casually said, "Maybe you could help me do it."
Soon, law enforcement turns their attention to a man named Len Genoff, a low-level private eye Fred Neulander hired to solve his wife's murder.
Genoff was living in a halfway house in the spring of 1993 when he met Neulander while attending AA meetings at the Makor Shalom Temple.
Detectives wonder why the rabbi would hire someone who seems professionally unequipped and who has a reputation around Cherry Hill as a drunk.
Law enforcement continues to investigate a possible Genoff connection. By the end of 1997, homicide detectives remain convinced that Fred Neulander orchestrated his wife's death. Camden County, New Jersey, Thursday, September 10, 1998, 9:15 a.m. Cherry Hill police pull over Fred Neulander and arrest him.
Police take him to the Camden County Jail, where he's held on suspicion of first-degree murder. He pleads not guilty at his arraignment, posts a $400,000 bail, and returns home to lay low during the lead-up to trial.
In late April 2000, just 2 months prior to trial, the Camden County Prosecutor's Office gets an unexpected call from a reporter.
Nancy Phillips, who works for the Philadelphia Inquirer, tells District Attorney Lee Solomon that she wants to meet with him and the lead investigator on the Neulander case, Marty Devlin.
On April 28th, Devlin and Solomon meet Phillips at a diner in Audubon, New Jersey.
To their surprise, Phillips brings Len Genoff with her.
Phillips tells the two detectives that Genoff had given her the untold story of what actually happened to Carol Neulander on the night of November 1st, 1994.
Genoff admits that he killed Carol on orders from Rabbi Fred Neulander.
Genoff explains that back in the spring of 1994, the rabbi told him there was an enemy of the state of Israel living in Cherry Hill who needed to be taken out.
Genoff agreed to help get rid of this person, a woman, because he felt like he owed the rabbi. Yet, he claims he never knew the woman was Neulander's wife.
Genoff says Rabbi Fred offered to pay him $30,000 for the hit.
Throughout the spring of 1994, Genoff and Neulander discussed how to kill Carol.
Fred ultimately concludes that they should make the murder look like a botched robbery.
Genoff was originally supposed to kill Carol Neulander on October 25th, but once Carol invited him inside the house, he couldn't find her purse. Fred had insisted that Genoff steal his wife's purse to make the robbery ploy look authentic.
Genoff ended up using the bathroom in an attempt to look for the purse, but came up empty and ultimately left the house. Detectives now know that Len Genoff is the infamous bathroom guy.
Neulander, who'd already paid Genoff $7,500, was apparently furious when the two men met the following day.
It's at this point that Genoff says he enlisted the help of his roommate, 21-year-old Paul Michael Daniels. Daniels had a drug problem, and he was willing to help kill Carol for the money.
On Tuesday, November 1st, the two men go to the Neulander residence. Carol lets them in, but is talking on the phone. Genoff explains that once Carol gets off the call, Daniels hit her in the head once with a section of a lead pipe.
Afterward, Genoff met up with Daniels in a nearby parking lot. There, Daniels handed him a duffel bag containing the lead pipe, Carol's burgundy purse, and a windbreaker covered in blood.
Genoff says Neulander paid him another $7,500 a couple days later. He also explains the sole reason the rabbi hired him to be a private investigator was to launder the balance of the $30,000 contract.
Genoff and Daniels are subsequently arrested for the murder of Carol Neulander.
By May 2000, 5.5 years after Carol Neulander was savagely murdered in her New Jersey home, police have charged 3 suspects: private investigator Len Genoff, Genoff's roommate Paul Daniels, and Carol's own husband, Rabbi Fred Neulander. Under questioning, Genoff and Daniels confessed that they beat Carol to death on the rabbi's orders in exchange for money.
Len Genoff provides police with an 89-page statement laying out the murder-for-hire plot.
Genoff also alleges that Rabbi Neulander drew him a map of the house so he'd know exactly where to attack Carol, and put a dead bulb in the front porch light so it would be dark when the hit went down.
That June, Len Genoff strikes a deal with the Camden County Prosecutor's Office.
In exchange for his cooperation and a guilty plea, the charges against him are reduced from murder to aggravated manslaughter.
Paul Daniels makes the same deal with the DA, yet because he took Carol's burgundy purse, he's also charged with robbery.
On June 22nd, Rabbi Fred Neulander is re-indicted on charges of capital murder and conspiracy to commit murder. A judge revokes his bail and he's sent to Camden County Correctional Facility.
Just who exactly is the disgraced rabbi who's accused of masterminding the murder of his wife?
Fred Neulander is born in Queens, New York in 1941. Friends from high school remember him as charming, but possibly ashamed of his middle-class upbringing.
In 1962, while majoring in religious studies at Trinity College, Neulander meets Carol Litz. 3 years later, in December 1965, they marry.
The Neulanders have their 3rd child by 1974. The same year, Fred and a friend decide to open their own Reform temple in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Makor Shalom.
In 1980, Carol opens her first Classic Cakes retail shop.
Within a couple years, Classic Cakes is making millions per year.
Carol sells the company, but stays on as a salaried employee. Naively, she brings home upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 in cash in her burgundy purse, which she counts on the kitchen table.
Fred's aware of his wife's money-counting ritual, which leads him to believe that by staging a botched robbery, he could get away with murder.
Camden, New Jersey, Tuesday, October 16th, 2001. The murder trial of Fred Neulander gets underway at the County Hall of Justice. Neulander's former mistress, Elaine Sonsini, as well as Len Genoff and Paul Daniels testify for the state. The rabbi does take the stand in his own defense.
Neulander testifies that he had nothing to do with the murder of his wife. He does admit that he had extramarital relationships, but qualifies it by claiming that he and Carol had an open marriage.
After several days of deliberations, the jurors are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. On November 13th, 2001, the judge declares a mistrial.
Freehold, New Jersey, Wednesday, November 20th, 2002. After a month-long retrial, a Monmouth County jury convicts Rabbi Fred Neulander on 3 counts: capital murder, felony murder, and second-degree conspiracy to commit murder.
In January 2003, Neulander is sentenced to life in prison. Later that same month, Len Genoff and Paul Daniels are both sentenced to 23 years in prison, with parole eligibility after 10 years served.
Fred Neulander is someone who always craved having more power, and one way to achieve this power was by being a religious leader. By being a rabbi, he could get people to respect him, listen to him, and to kill his wife.
Metairie, Louisiana, Thursday, August 31st, 2006, 3 p.m. 46-year-old respiratory therapist Mary Elizabeth Marinello enters Metairie Towers office building.
Liz has a regularly scheduled therapy session with social worker Mary Ann Catalanato.
After the counseling session, Liz exits the office building through the back door and walks across the parking lot to her SUV. As soon as she gets to her car, Liz fumbles around in her purse to get her keys out.
Liz is caught off guard when a man approaches. He invades her personal space and just stares at her without uttering a word.
The man pulls a revolver and fires 2 shots.
Inside Metairie Towers, businessman Stan Bundy hears the gunshots and looks out his office window just in time to spot a disheveled-looking old man pedaling away from the parking lot on a bicycle.
Seeing there's a woman lying on the asphalt, Stan grabs a couple of colleagues and they rush down to the parking lot. They find Liz Marinello still breathing, but unable to communicate, and they immediately dial 911.
First responders with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office and the EMS arrive within minutes.
They find Liz Marinello on the ground with her purse still under her shoulder. Paramedics rush her to Charity Trauma Center 5 miles away. She's barely conscious.
Back at Metairie Towers, detectives walk the crime scene.
Initially, it looks like Liz Marinello could be the victim of a robbery gone wrong. There's been an uptick in crime as many residents displaced by Hurricane Katrina migrate back to New Orleans and its suburbs.
However, the keys to Marinello's SUV and her credit cards remain inside her purse.
The nature and precision with which Liz had been shot suggests to investigators that she'd been specifically targeted.
Detectives soon review security footage from the building's back parking lot.
They can see a bearded man wearing a blue, green, and black plaid flannel shirt arrive on a bicycle around 3:30 p.m.
The man never enters the office building. Instead, he just mills around. Interestingly, another woman exits the complex minutes before Liz Marinello, but the bearded man never approaches her.
At 3:53 p.m., the strange man starts moving toward Liz's vehicle.
At 3:56, Marinello appears on the security cameras as she leaves the building. By 3:57, it appears as though she's on the ground.
Around 6 o'clock that evening, Commander Dennis Thornton of the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, or JPSO, speaks with counselor Mary Ann Catalanato.
Catalanato tells Thornton that for the past several months, she's been counseling Liz from 3 to 3:50 every Thursday to address anxiety and depression stemming from her marital problems.
Catalanato explains that Liz's husband, Vince Marinello, used to attend the meetings with Liz, but had stopped going once the marriage started heading for divorce.
The Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office has been trying to contact Vince ever since the shooting, but Vince hasn't returned their calls.
Law enforcement considers the possibility that Vince Marinello might be involved in his wife's shooting.
However, the 69-year-old radio broadcaster, who happens to be a local celebrity, has no facial hair and is known to be a sharp dresser.
As police continue attempting to reach Vince, his wife's ex-husband, Peter Caruso, makes repeated calls to him as well.
When Liz failed to pick up their 10-year-old daughter, Claire, from daycare, Caruso had received a call from a friend who works at Charity Trauma Center. Liz was there in critical condition and on life support.
Vince doesn't return calls to Caruso or the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office.
Doctors spend the evening fighting to save Liz Marinello's life. At 1:57 a.m., she's pronounced dead.
An autopsy is conducted later that morning. Liz Marinello suffered bullet wounds to the face just under her right eye. From those wounds, the medical examiner is able to remove fragments of blue-tip bullets coated in nylon.
These particular bullets have markings consistent with being fired from a .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver.
Meanwhile, around 10 a.m. on Friday, September 1st, Vince Marinello finally calls back the sheriff's office.
He explains that the reason he's been out of communication with everyone is because he was out of town and is just now heading back to New Orleans.
Before getting off the phone, Marinello agrees to meet with detectives later at the sheriff's office to give a statement.
Harvey, Louisiana, Friday, September 1st, 2006, 5 p.m. Vince Marinello and his attorney meet with homicide detectives at a sheriff's substation.
The detectives asked Vince where he was the time of his wife's shooting. Marinello explains that he spent the previous afternoon driving from his home, currently a FEMA trailer in the upscale Lakeview neighborhood in New Orleans, to visit friends Dave and Annette Daniels in Byron, Mississippi.
Marinello claims that he left New Orleans between 3:15 and 3:30 that afternoon and didn't stop during the entire 175-mile drive until finally arriving at the Daniels' house.
Marinello claims he arrived in Byron around 6 p.m. to watch the Saints preseason NFL game on TV with Annette.
Detectives then ask Marinello how he learned that his wife had been shot.
Vince explains that he only found out about Liz's shooting after Annette received a call from her sister around 10 o'clock that night saying she'd seen on the news that Liz had been a victim of a shooting. Marinello admits that he never called the hospital to check on his wife's status, but he doesn't offer an explanation as to why he didn't.
Next, the officers ask Vince about his marriage.
Vince admits that he and Liz have recently been embroiled in an acrimonious divorce, which she filed for nearly 2 months prior in early July.
He tells the officers they'd gotten into a physical altercation, which resulted in Liz being arrested.
Marinello says in no uncertain terms that he was not involved in the shooting that took her life.
Yet, Marinello does own a gun.
He admits that the previous month he'd purchased a 9mm handgun for protection, as his Lakeview neighborhood remained sparsely populated due to the 10 to 15 feet of flooding from Hurricane Katrina.
Byram, Mississippi, Saturday, September 2nd, 2006, 1:15 p.m. 2 Jefferson Parish Sheriff's investigators arrive at the Daniels' home. Vince had also shown up unexpectedly earlier that same day.
Vince voluntarily steps outside so that Annette and David can give statements to law enforcement.
Annette is interviewed first.
Annette explains that shortly after noon on the day of the shooting, Vince called her saying he was coming to watch the game that night.
According to Annette, Vince arrived at their house between 5 and 6 p.m., which is consistent with what he told law enforcement under questioning.
This timeline suggests it would have been virtually impossible for Vince to shoot his wife at 3:56 p.m., then drive 175 miles to arrive in Byram before 6 p.m.
Detectives questioned David Daniels, but he wasn't even home on the evening of August 31st. However, he does tell the officers that in the early 80s, he purchased a .38 Taurus revolver from Oshman Sporting Goods that his wife had given to Vince Marinello after Katrina.
Detectives go back to Annette. She flat out denies that she'd ever given Vince the revolver.
Less than 36 hours after Liz Marinello's murder, Jefferson Parish sheriffs execute a search warrant on her home in Harahan, Louisiana.
They're surprised to find nasty handwritten notes Vince had written his wife. The notes seem to indicate that Marinello was jealous, insecure, and borderline abusive.
On August 31st, 2006, 46-year-old Liz Marinello is gunned down in the parking lot outside her therapist's office. The prime suspect is an unknown bearded man on surveillance video, pedaling away from the scene on a bicycle. Within the first 48 hours, law enforcement begins to suspect that her husband, local sports broadcaster Vince Marinello, might be involved in the homicide. On September 5th, officers visit Elliott's Small Arms gun shop in Jefferson, Louisiana, where Vince claimed he recently purchased a 9mm handgun.
They recover a copy of Marinello's receipt for the 9mm purchase on August 8th. As detectives exit the store clerk, Alan Reese, shocks them by saying, "You probably recovered some 158 grain Nyclad ammunition from her face, didn't you?"
Information about these Nyclad bullets being retrieved from Liz Marinello's face at the autopsy had never been released to the public.
The detectives press the clerk for more.
Reese explains that back in July, Vince Marinello came into Elliott's with a .38 revolver that he wanted to test fire.
Vince also wanted to buy ammo. On Reese's suggestion, Marinello purchased the rare nylon-coated Nyclad bullets, which are so rare that Elliott's gun shop was the only store in Louisiana that sold them.
Acting on an anonymous tip, JPSO detectives then head to Vieux Carré hair shop in the Riverbend section of New Orleans.
Store clerk James Rizzuto tells the officers that Vince Marinello purchased a fake mustache from the store on August 22nd.
Police begin to question if the disheveled bearded man from the surveillance footage, who's believed to be Liz Marinello's killer, might actually be her husband, Vince.
On September 6th, investigators interview residents from the neighborhood surrounding the Metairie Towers office building.
Leonard Tubbs recalls hearing gunshots, then seeing a man in a flannel shirt with a scruffy beard and a hat pedaling away from the parking lot 20 to 30 seconds later.
The authorities want to talk to Vince Marinello again.
Harvey, Louisiana, Wednesday, September 6th, 2006, 5:44 p.m. Vince Marinello returns to the sheriff's office with his attorney for a second round of questions.
Vince confirms that over 20 years ago, Annette and David Daniels gave him a gun as a Christmas gift, but claims that he returned it to them shortly after receiving it. Vince maintains that he's never fired a gun in his life.
Vince also admits that he purchased the mustache at Vieux Carré, but says it was only to enhance his look. He claims he discarded it shortly after the purchase and denies having a costume beard of any kind.
Detectives ask Marinello if he owns a bicycle. Vince explains that he hasn't owned one in years because of back trouble.
When pressed about his August visit to Elliott's gun shop, Vince doesn't admit to owning any weapons that were test-fired, yet he does say he bought .38 caliber ammo for a gun he was considering buying.
At that point, Marinello's attorney terminates the interview.
That same evening, two detectives returned to Byram, Mississippi for a follow-up interview with Annette Daniels.
Annette now contradicts some of the statements she made before. First, she claims that Vince arrived on August 31st, not before, but after the Saints game, which kicked off at 7:30, had already started.
Annette explains that even though Vince did return the .38 caliber, she hasn't seen it since November 2004. That's when she moved it to a bathroom closet inside their home in Lakeview, which had been ravaged by Hurricane Katrina floodwaters.
According to Annette, Vince has had access to that home since Katrina and regularly checks on the residents.
Then, Daniels delivers one final bombshell.
Apparently on Tuesday, September 2nd, Vince had left behind some dirty clothes on the washing machine, which she'd just recently thrown in the garbage.
The officers seize the trash and find a green shirt with blue and black stripes, much like the clothing eyewitnesses had seen the presumed shooter wearing as he pedaled away from the crime scene.
By early September 2006, 1 week after 46-year-old therapist Liz Marinello is murdered in a Metairie, Louisiana parking lot, police turn up the heat on her husband, Vince. The popular local sports broadcaster has quickly become the prime person of interest.
On the evening of September 6th, authorities execute a search warrant on Marinello's FEMA trailer and his home in Lakeview.
Inside Marinello's FEMA trailer, investigators collect clothing, checking account ledgers, a 9mm handgun, and ammo.
But there's a single piece of paper on the dining table that's particularly shocking.
It's a bulleted list of tasks that read like a murder checklist. Some of the bullet points say things like the gun, river on way to mama, mustache, okay, insurance money, none, clothes, burn.
The list also talks about painting the bike and includes several items that might be interpreted as part of a disguise, including gloves, black tennis shoes, sunglasses, and a white shirt.
On the back of the document, there's a diagram of the Metairie Towers parking lot.
Police issue an arrest warrant for Vince Marinello. He turns himself in without incident the following afternoon.
Jefferson Parish sheriffs continue gathering evidence against their prime suspect. Detectives speak to Patricia Whitey, the woman who appears on security video exiting Metairie Towers before Liz Marinello.
Whitey tells investigators that she saw a man with a fake-looking beard, jeans, a hat, and a long-sleeved flannel shirt milling around the parking lot. The man had worn leather skin, was around 6 feet tall, 175 to 180 pounds, and his bizarre appearance gave her cause for concern.
Another eyewitness, Spencer Harris, tells police that around 3:15 p.m., the same bearded white male got out of a Ford Taurus parked by the 17th Street Canal, then struggled to remove a bicycle from the rear. Harris observed the man ride the bike towards Metairie Road.
On Saturday, September 9th, the JPSO receives a call from a man named Dave Selmo, who worked on rehabbing Vince Marinello's house in late July and early August.
Apparently, when Marinello became aware of Selmo's extensive military background and firearms knowledge, he retrieved a vintage .38 caliber revolver from the house and asked Selmo if it could be equipped with a silencer.
In mid-September, a forensic team finally inspects the white Ford Taurus Marinello had been driving.
Tests reveal gunshot residue on the driver's side door, armrest, and a large portion of the steering wheel.
Meanwhile, on September 11th, Vince Marinello posts a $250,000 bond and is released from Jefferson Parish Jail.
Vince Marinello was born in 1937. He grows up in New Orleans' Upper Ninth Ward.
At St. Aloysius High School, Vince plays basketball and baseball and is already an all-around sports fan.
Marinello begins his broadcasting career in the 1970s. In the 80s, he finds his niche covering the Saints football team, which he continues to do throughout the 90s.
Colleagues describe Vince as a real pro who's always dressed to the nines and purports himself as a man of wealth.
In February 2004, Vince is at New Orleans' famed rock and roll bowling alley when he spots Mary Elizabeth Norman.
Vince asks Liz to dance. He's still technically married to his second wife, Andrea, even though he would claim to have been divorced since 1982.
After the bowling alley encounter, Vince tracks Liz down. They begin to date, but the relationship is built on a series of lies from Marinello, including that he has mafia connections and a law degree from LSU.
8 months later, on October 23rd, they get married despite the fact that Vince's divorce from his second wife doesn't go through until the 26th.
The marriage seems doomed from the outset.
Before long, Liz discovers that her new husband has an egomaniacal side, which is clear from the nasty letters he writes her.
On May 29th, Vince and Liz get into a physical altercation.
Liz has bruises which she shows her mother Bertha, maintaining that Vince pinned her against the wall and the only way she could escape was to scratch and push him.
On July 6, 2006, Liz has an attorney draft divorce papers. The last straw comes on July 25th, when Liz discovers for certain that Vince had still been married when they tied the knot. She has her lawyer amend the divorce petition to ask for an annulment due to bigamy.
Vince responds by going to the DA and having Liz arrested on domestic violence allegations. On August 7th, she's booked by Harahan Police on battery charges.
In early December 2006, nearly 3.5 months after his wife had been shot leaving her therapist's office, a Jefferson Parish, Louisiana grand jury indicts 69-year-old sports broadcaster Vince Marinello on second-degree murder charges.
Because Marinello is a household name, the murder trial ends up being moved 135 miles away, where there's a better chance of obtaining an impartial jury.
Lafayette, Louisiana, Tuesday, December 2nd, 2008. The murder trial of Vince Marinello gets underway at Lafayette Parish Courthouse.
The prosecution's case is simple. Liz Marinello's killer, the gunman spotted by surveillance cameras and eyewitnesses, was none other than Vince Marinello in disguise.
The state alleges that Marinello parked his Ford Taurus within 3 blocks of where he knew his wife would be, then put on a disguise, retrieved his bike from the trunk, and rode it over to Metairie Towers. There, he shot Liz twice in the face before pedaling the same route back to his car and driving off.
Prosecutors present a series of witnesses who shine light on Marinello's odd behavior on the day of the shooting, as well as the days leading up to it.
Todd Meneses, the assistant program director at WWL, where Marinello worked, testifies that he saw Vince in the elevator on August 31st looking like a hobo, which he found strange considering how well-dressed Vince normally was.
PE teacher Lauren White, who works down the street from Metairie Towers at Metairie Academy, testifies that she saw a disheveled-looking man on a bike multiple times in the days leading up to August 31st. He was always headed towards Metairie Towers.
White tells the jury that on one occasion, this vagrant looked straight at her with scary eyes. When she'd seen Vince Marinello's mugshot on TV, she immediately knew without a doubt that he was the strange man on the bike she'd seen near the school.
Some of the most damning evidence presented against Marinello are his cell phone records, which the prosecution uses to disprove his alibi that he left Mississippi at 3:15 on the day his wife was shot.
2 hours before the shooting, at 1:58 p.m., Vince places a call that originated within a half-mile radius of the cell tower at 433 Metairie Road, which proves he was in the area where Liz had been shot.
At 4:51, Vince got an incoming phone call which revealed his cell phone was somewhere in the vicinity of Ponchatoula, Louisiana, which is approximately 45 miles from Metairie. In optimal traffic, a drive that far would take 43 minutes, which proves that Vince had time to shoot his wife in Metairie at 3:57 p.m. that afternoon.
On December 12th, Marinello takes the stand.
He admits that he authored the infamous checklist found on the table inside his FEMA trailer, but insists that he compiled it after the murder to prove his innocence.
As for the mustache, Marinello explains that he purchased it to change his appearance, noting that he's worn a toupee for years and already had the necessary adhesives.
The jury doesn't buy Vince's story. On December 13th, 2008, they find him guilty of second-degree murder.
The jurors will later say that the most convincing piece of evidence was the surveillance video.
On January 22, 2009, Vince Marinello is sentenced to life in prison. He suffers a heart attack 5 days later and undergoes life-saving surgery. Once he recovers, he's transferred to Angola prison.
I think Vince Marinello was really just an example of somebody who was so blinded by whether it was rage or his hate of his wife and wanting to kill her. He really thought that he was too smart, and he really isn't.
Long Beach, California, Friday, August 17th, 2001, 5:30 p.m. 41-year-old real estate magnate Jana Carpenter Koklich is out at dinner with good friend Nini Angelini.
After dinner, the two women drive up to Los Angeles to attend an Eric Clapton concert.
Nini notices during the hour-long car ride that Jana seems distracted. Nevertheless, the two friends have a great time at the show.
After the show, Nini drives Jana to her house, which is in the upscale neighborhood of Lakewood.
Nini pulls up to Jana's just after midnight. All the lights are off.
Nini tells Jana to flash the lights when she gets inside as an indication that everything is all right. So seconds after Jana enters the front door, the lights flicker on and off 4 times. So Nini drives off.
The following morning, personal trainer Dean Costalis calls the Koklich residence. Jana didn't show up for their scheduled 7 a.m. workout.
There's no answer, so Costalis leaves a message. In all the months he's been training Jana, she's never missed a session.
At 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon, Jana's supposed to get a facial at Nini's skincare salon, but she doesn't show up.
Nini calls Jana's cell, office, and home phone lines multiple times, as well as Jana's husband's cell phone, and all of these calls go unanswered.
The following day, Sunday, August 19th, Jana's mother, Janie Carpenter, starts bombarding her daughter's phone.
Janie calls both Bruce and Jana's cell phone several times, but gets no answer. Janie had plans to go see a movie Saturday night with her daughter, but Jana never called to confirm.
The fact that neither Jana nor her husband Bruce answer their various phone lines is completely out of character. As a real estate power couple, they're rarely out of contact.
Long Beach, California, Monday, August 20th, 2001, 7:30 a.m. Bruce Koklich calls Nini Angelini from his office, leaving a voicemail saying that he's on his way to a funeral, but she should try Jana at home.
An hour later, Bruce takes a call from Jana's mother as he's leaving his colleague's funeral.
Janie asks Bruce where her daughter is. He tells her he kissed Jana goodbye that morning before he left for work and that she was still in bed. It's his belief that Jana's on her way in to the office.
Bruce returns to the office around 11:20 that morning.
He asks his employees if anyone has seen Jana. Nobody has.
Bruce decides he's going home to see if Jana's there. His colleague, Chris Bodison, goes along.
Bruce and Chris arrive at the Koklich residence within 5 minutes.
Jana isn't at home. Her car, keys, and purse are nowhere to be found. The house alarm has been set, so Bruce and Chris wonder if Jana might have gotten into a car accident on the way to the office. They decide to return to work.
Later Monday afternoon, Bruce takes Chris back to his house and plays him a bizarre message that had been left on the family's voicemail several weeks earlier. The message says, "Hey, hiya Jan. How you doing, Jana? Give me a ring back. You know who it is. Bye-bye."
Jana hadn't known who it was, and neither had Bruce.
Bruce claims the message had spooked Jana into not wanting to answer the phone. Now he's wondering if the mystery caller might be responsible for her sudden disappearance.
An LA County Sheriff's officer comes by the house to take a formal missing persons report.
Shortly after 5 p.m., several friends and family members begin stopping by. Bruce plays the odd voicemail for everyone, but nobody recognizes the caller.
Nini Angelini arrives later that evening, and she becomes frustrated that no one seems to be taking any meaningful steps to find Jana.
Around 8 p.m., Bruce and Chris Botosin go door to door through the neighborhood to see if anyone's seen Jana.
Bruce and Chris encounter off-duty Sheriff's Deputy Howard Cooper, who decides to accompany them back to the Koklich residence.
Back at the house, Bruce, Chris, Howard, Nini Angelini, and Jana's mom decide to search the premises for clues.
They don't seem to turn up anything indicating what may have happened to Jana, but Nini does notice some small, dark spots on the carpet in the master bedroom. However, she dismisses them.
The fact that Jana's purse and car are missing, but the alarm had been set, leads most in the group to think that either she left voluntarily or met with foul play outside the home.
Yet the off-duty cop believes something isn't adding up. He calls the LA County Sheriff's Homicide Bureau and gives them a heads up that Jana Carpenter Koklich's missing persons case may not end with her safe return.
The following day, Tuesday, August 21st, the Koklich's maid of nearly 10 years, Consuelo Lopez, arrives at the house as scheduled.
Consuelo notices that Jana's favorite sheets, which she put on the bed last Tuesday, are not there. Instead, there's just an incorrectly sized flat sheet covering the mattress. She's never known the Koklich's to change their own sheets, and the ones she put on the bed are nowhere to be found.
Around noon, LA County Sheriff's Detectives Dolores Scott and Mary Bice interview Bruce at home.
Bruce assures officers that his relationship with Jana is solid, and neither of them has ever had any affairs. He goes on at length about how this past Saturday and Sunday, they'd mutually decided not to work as the conference the prior weekend had been so taxing.
Scott and Bice ask Bruce about the missing bedsheets.
He doesn't have an answer, but he does say that he hadn't noticed they were different from the ones Consuelo put on the bed the previous Tuesday.
Lakewood, California, Tuesday, August 21st, 2001, 7 p.m. Homicide detectives Joe Sheehy and Steve Davis interview Janie Carpenter and Chris Botosin at the sheriff's office.
Carpenter stresses that Jana would never blow off the plans they had and that it was totally out of character for her daughter to stop answering phone calls. Chris doesn't have any insight about the weekend, but mentions that he headed to the office at 8:30 Monday morning. Since then, he hasn't seen Bruce make any calls to his wife, which is strange if Bruce truly thought his wife was missing.
On Monday, August 20th, 2001, 41-year-old real estate entrepreneur Jana Carpenter Koklich is reported missing to the Los Angeles County Sheriffs after she fails to show up to work.
Records confirm that her cell phone hasn't been used to make any calls since Friday night when she attended an Eric Clapton concert with her friend Nini Angelini.
Cops quickly learned from family and friends that neither Jana nor her husband Bruce answered their phones that weekend, which was highly unusual. Also, her car and purse are both missing, which suggests to law enforcement that she may have met with foul play.
Around 7:30 on Tuesday, August 21st, homicide detectives question Bruce Koklich at the Lakewood Sheriff's substation. He walks them through his timeline over the past 72 hours.
Bruce claims he doesn't recall what time his wife got home from the Eric Clapton concert, yet he does recall that Jana decided to sleep in Saturday morning instead of go to her personal training session.
Bruce tells detectives the last time he saw Jana was approximately 6:15 Monday morning, when she got out of bed and said, "I'll see you at the office, sweetie."
Bruce wonders if someone had been stalking Jana or gotten into the house and abducted her.
Sheehy asks Koklich point blank if he has any reason to kill his wife. And Bruce responds, hell no. And he asserts that Jana is the love of his life and there are no issues in their marriage.
That afternoon, Bruce holds a press conference and offers a $100,000 reward for Jana's safe return.
He does shed some tears. After he steps down from the podium, he shocks business partner Chris Baudison by allegedly telling him, "There, I cried for you on national television."
That evening, a woman named Rosie Ritchie calls the LA County Sheriffs claiming to have info about Bruce Koklich. She's asked to come down to the station.
Ritchie explains that a decade ago, while working for a title insurance company, she met Bruce in an apartment building in Long Beach. They entered an empty apartment and he proceeded to shut the door and proposition her for oral sex.
Offended, Ritchie declined and went back to tell her boss. Thereafter, it came to her attention that Bruce Koklich had a reputation in Long Beach real estate circles for propositioning women on the job.
On Thursday, August 23rd, Detectives Sheehy and Davis interview Arita Lapierre and her husband Alan Radcliffe, who work at the hair salon next to the Koklich's real estate office.
Lapierre and Radcliffe claim they saw a blonde woman they believe was Jana driving in the alley behind their businesses. They're pretty sure the woman was driving a white Nissan Pathfinder, which is exactly the kind of car Jana drove. Bruce's attorney hires a private investigator to follow the lead.
Lapierre admits that she assumed the woman was Jana because Jana drove a similar SUV, but she never actually saw the woman's face.
Lapierre also claims she once caught Bruce passionately kissing a woman other than his wife.
On Monday, August 27th, detectives re-interview Jana's friend Nini Angelini.
Nini tells investigators that she doesn't think Jana went walking with Bruce, as he'd claimed, because Jana had shin splints.
Later that same day, law enforcement acts on a tip and finds Jana's missing SUV abandoned in the Signal Hill area of Long Beach.
Jana's purse is missing, so is a .380 Sig Sauer that she kept in the glove box. Jana herself is nowhere to be found.
When CSI examines the Pathfinder the following day, they find 2 partial prints, but they don't link to anyone. Inside the cargo area, they find 2 feathers, likely from a pillow, and a discolored section of carpet that tests positive for blood.
Signal Hill, California, Tuesday, August 28, 2001. Sheriff's detectives field a call from a Reverend Herman L. Bryant.
Detectives learned that on the morning of August 20th, 2 teens, 14-year-old Rayshawn and 18-year-old Michael, entered the SUV where it was parked on Lewis Avenue in Signal Hill.
The boys took Jana's purse off the passenger seat and split the cash in her wallet. Rayshawn took Jana's cell phone. Afterward, they threw the purse onto the roof of a 3-story apartment building.
The following day, Reverend Bryant leads detectives to the apartment building.
They're able to pull Jana's purse down from the rooftop. Inside, they find Jana's license, checkbook, and credit cards.
Reverend Bryan will later turn over the missing .380 handgun to police after it's anonymously returned to him.
Now that they've located Jana's missing car, purse, and personal items, law enforcement works overtime to determine if her husband, Bruce Koklich, is responsible for her disappearance, as they suspect.
By the end of August 2001, less than 2 weeks after Jana Carpenter Koklich seemingly vanishes without a trace from Long Beach, California, police have finally located her missing SUV and personal items. The LA County Sheriff starts surveilling her husband, Bruce Koklich, in early September, suspecting he might be responsible for her disappearance.
On September 5th, detectives return to the Koklich residence to execute a fresh search warrant. They spray luminol on an area of carpet in the master bedroom where Jana's friend Nini Angelini told police she saw dark spots. 3 small areas light up, which indicates the presence of blood.
Forensic tests on the spots will eventually show an exact match to DNA that's been retrieved from Jana's hairbrush and toothbrush. Without a doubt, it's her blood.
Then, on Monday, September 24th, the LA County Sheriff's Office fields a call from a woman named Marlene Leach, who works for a women's resource center 350 miles away in Sonora, California.
Leach is transferred to Detective Sheehy. She tells him a disturbing story about Bruce Koklich's 18-year-old niece, Jennifer Tichenal. After the call, Sheehy notifies Sonora police to go take a statement from Jennifer.
Jennifer's statement alleges that she spent 4 days with her uncle from September 18th to the 22nd, during which time he'd repeatedly harassed her and possibly attempted to sexually assault her.
On September 26th, the LA County Sheriffs fly Jennifer down to Long Beach and put her up at a hotel. There, she's interviewed by detectives from the homicide and sex crimes units.
Jennifer explains that Bruce had come to visit her father, Dan, his stepbrother, early that September. During that visit, Bruce promised he'd return to Sonora, pick her up, and bring her back to Lakewood.
Bruce had claimed that he'd help her get a job, car, and education. Jennifer was eager for the fresh start.
During the 6-hour drive back to Lakewood, he allegedly propositioned Jennifer to begin a sexual relationship.
Over the next 4 days, whenever Bruce was home, he would solicit Jennifer for sex. She repeatedly told him no.
Bruce allegedly made one final move on Jennifer following a night out at the bar.
Bruce brought his niece back to a friend's condo where he made one final indecent proposal, laughing and saying, "I'm really grieving," suggesting that he could use her in this time of need.
When Jennifer turns Bruce down yet again, he tells her he's taking her back to Sonora.
Jennifer tells the detectives one final detail, that Bruce told her he believed his wife was dead.
Detectives question Bruce about Jennifer. He denies that he had sex with her and claims that the reason he'd taken her back to Sonora was because she drank like a fish.
The situation worsens for Koklich on October 9th, when forensic tests confirm that a discolored section of carpet from the cargo area of Jana's Pathfinder is blood. Her blood. Detectives theorize that Bruce killed his wife sometime between midnight and 7 a.m. on August 18th.
They don't draw any conclusions for how he committed the murder, but there's speculation that he could have shot Jana using her pillow, which is missing, to muffle the sounds of a gunshot.
Given the relatively tiny amounts of blood found in the home and the SUV, it's also possible that he strangled her to death. Regardless of the method, investigators do believe Bruce used Jana's favorite bed sheets to transport her dead body.
Detectives further hypothesize that Bruce dropped Jana's SUV off in Signal Hill on the night of August 19th, believing minorities in that community would tamper with the vehicle and throw investigators off his trail.
In mid-December 2001, the DA's Major Crimes Unit determines that even though police have never found Jana's body, there isn't any evidence whatsoever of her being alive after August 20th.
The DA's office gives investigators the green light to go pick up Bruce Koklich. On January 31st, 2002, LA County Sheriffs arrest him without incident at his office.
On January 31st, 2002, 5 months after his wife Jana went missing in Long Beach, California under suspicious circumstances, 42-year-old real estate maven Bruce Koklich is arrested and charged with their first-degree murder. Koklich pleads not guilty at arraignment. His bail is set at $1.5 million, and he's transferred to Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles.
Bruce Koklich spends 2 weeks locked up before his legal team raises the bail money. He's released from jail on February 15th and returns home to resume his work life.
Prosecutors spend the next 12 months preparing their murder case against Koklich, a monumental task considering his wife's body has never been found.
Who exactly is Bruce Koklich, and what motive could he have had to want his wife dead? In the late 1970s, after graduating from high school, Bruce moves to Southern California and ends up working in the oil fields.
Bruce develops an interest in real estate after fixing up a distressed property. The rehab leads him to get his real estate license in 1982.
That same year, Bruce meets Jana Carpenter at a restaurant in Huntington Beach, California. They begin dating, and she eventually moves in with him, foregoing law school to get involved in real estate herself.
Bruce and Jana form their own company in 1989. They marry the following year in June.
The Kokliches work like mad to grow their business. Some people think that Bruce is obsessed with getting rich and often behaves in a manner that is ruthless and unprincipled.
As the Kokliches' earnings increase, their marriage goes downhill.
A big source of contention is the fact that Jana is unable to conceive. When attempts at surrogacy fail, they turn to adoption, but those plans are soon abandoned.
According to Nini, it's possible that by the summer of 2001, Jana was contemplating divorce from Bruce.
Jana had lost 25 pounds. She was taking greater care of her appearance and even standing up to Bruce more and more. Interestingly, Bruce and Jana have $1 million life insurance policies on one another. They also share $5 million in real estate assets, plus additional money in the value of their home, $310,000 in investments, and $270,000 in available credit.
Norwalk, California, Monday, February 18th, 2002. The murder trial of Bruce Koklich gets underway at Norwalk Superior Court.
The prosecution argues that Bruce Koklich killed his wife because he wanted all the money from his and Jana's joint ventures, as well as the freedom to sleep with other women.
The defense counters, poking holes in the sheriff's investigation and maintaining that without a body, there's reasonable doubt that Jana Carpenter Koklich is even dead and that Bruce has any involvement whatsoever.
Bruce Koklich does take the stand in his own defense.
He admits to patronizing erotic massage parlors and doesn't refute the stories of sexual aggression the state's witness testified to. However, he claims he's never had a love affair and that Jana remains the love of his life.
The case goes to the jury on March 13, 2003.
After 6 days of deliberation, the jury deadlocks 7-5, guilty versus not guilty, so the judge declares a mistrial.
6 months later, in September 2003, Bruce's second trial gets underway. This time, he does not testify.
On October 7th, the new jury convicts Bruce of second-degree murder. He's eventually sentenced to 15 years to life in state prison.
Bruce Koklich was a narcissist, and narcissism can be a lethal character flaw. Narcissists must be in control. It's all about them, and when Jana was no longer willing to be his victim, he made her his victim.
Alhambra, California, Friday, July 25th, 1997, 7 p.m. 43-year-old software engineer Bruce Cleland arrives at his parents' house after work. He's been living with them for 3 months, ever since separating from his wife, Rebecca.
Bruce tells his parents that he's going to dinner with his estranged wife that evening, hoping to salvage their tumultuous 6-month marriage.
Rebecca picks Bruce up around 8 o'clock. They head to their favorite Mexican restaurant, La Parrilla, which is in East Los Angeles.
Bruce and Rebecca arrive at La Parrilla around 9:30. They enjoy 2 rounds of beers, then eat dinner and dessert. Before leaving, they order a to-go meal for Rebecca's uncle, Arturo Quezada.
Around 11 p.m., Rebecca and Bruce pull up to her uncle's house in Boyle Heights.
Rebecca is so close to Arturo that she refers to him as Dad. She and Bruce spend the evening with him and his girlfriend, drinking and enjoying each other's company.
Around 1 in the morning, Rebecca excuses herself to make a quick call on her cell phone.
Rebecca and Bruce say their goodbyes and leave Arturo's house. Rebecca thinks Bruce is too intoxicated to drive, so she takes the wheel. She rolls down the driver's side window as they take off.
Rebecca heads for the highway. As she pulls up to the stop sign at the corner of Beswick and Concord, she notices a warning light signaling the back hatch of her SUV is open.
Rebecca gets out and walks around to the rear of the vehicle to reclose the hatch. Without warning, a figure emerges from the bushes and points a handgun through the driver's side window at Bruce.
The assailant fires 2 shots, one of which hits Bruce in the cheek. Bruce jumps out of the car in panic and runs down the street.
The gunman chases after him, continuing to let bullets fly. A bullet rips through Bruce's lower back. Another enters the back of his head, causing Bruce to collapse face down on the concrete.
The gunman approaches, lowers the barrel, and coldly delivers a final shot to the back of Bruce's head before sprinting off into the darkness. Hearing the shots, one of the residents nearby calls 911.
911 emergency 665. Hi, there was just some shooting outside my house, and now there's a car parked. I think they were shooting at the car, and the car's not moving at all. Did you see anyone? I saw somebody running down. It was one guy dressed in black.
Bruce remains motionless on the pavement. Rebecca is also on the ground, unconscious in the fetal position behind the car. Within seconds, an LAPD cruiser arrives on the scene.
One of the officers checks on Bruce, but he exhibits no signs of life. Another officer attends to Rebecca.
Rebecca is groggy but able to sit up. Oddly, her high-heel shoes are nearby on the asphalt, neatly placed side by side.
The officer begins questioning Rebecca, hoping to get a description of the attacker. But Rebecca just keeps complaining and repeating, "They hit me on the head."
The officer presses Rebecca further to determine what exactly happened, but she claims she did not hear or see anything. Strangely, Rebecca never once inquires about her husband's condition, despite the fact that he's laying face down just 30 yards away.
Paramedics arrive on the scene. They examine Rebecca for injuries, but there are no signs of obvious trauma on her body.
Rebecca asks if she can call her dad, Arturo. The officers allow her to retrieve her cell phone from the car and make the call.
As Rebecca's on the phone with her uncle, the officers overhear her tell Arturo, "Something has happened. We're on Beswick. They killed him."
Following the call, Rebecca is placed into the back of a squad car, where she's questioned in detail.
Rebecca walks an officer through the evening's events. Her story ends with her somehow being knocked unconscious and having the diamond engagement ring Bruce bought her stolen.
The officer asks Rebecca if she thinks someone may have been following her and Bruce, or if she could identify a possible suspect. She has nothing to offer.
Rebecca is transported to the police station.
East Los Angeles, California, Saturday, July 26, 1997, 4 a.m. Inside Hollenbeck Police Station, veteran homicide investigator Walter Angulo questions Rebecca Cleland.
Rebecca gives an in-depth statement. She explains how she and Bruce have been having marital problems, but she makes it clear that dinner that night was to celebrate their reconciliation.
Toward the end of the interview, Rebecca walks through how she got out of the car to check the rear hatch and was subsequently knocked unconscious from behind. The next thing she remembers is waking up and seeing Bruce lying in a driveway across the street. After the interview, Rebecca asks when she'll be able to talk to her husband. Detective Angulo is unsure if Rebecca is suffering from shock or being deceitful. He's well aware that Rebecca had called her uncle from the crime scene and told him Bruce had been killed.
Angulo decides to inform Rebecca of Bruce's death. She starts to cry and teeters on hysterics. Eventually she calms down, enough to once again say her diamond engagement ring was stolen.
Rebecca is eventually allowed to leave. Her uncle Arturo picks her up. Meanwhile, back at Beswick and Concord, lead detective Tom Herman and his partner Rick Peterson continue their crime scene investigation.
The detectives are surprised to find Bruce Cleland's wristwatch, a gold wedding band, and a billfold containing $25 in cash still on his person.
Looking through the SUV, they find Rebecca's purse seemingly untouched. Her wallet, containing several credit cards, is inside, along with a bracelet, a necklace, and a small photo album.
The officers sift through the album.
One of the photographs is of Rebecca posing affectionately with a young, good-looking man. Detectives quickly determine the man's name is Steve Rivera. They add his name to the list of people they plan to question at a later date.
On Monday, July 28th, Detective Herman contacts Lupe Hernandez, the woman who made the initial call to 911.
Lupe tells Herman that when she heard gunshots coming from outside, she went to the window and saw the Cleland's SUV parked at the intersection, with its engine still running.
Lupe says she then saw a man dressed in dark, baggy clothes running from the scene.
According to Lupe, the man looked Hispanic and appeared to be in his 20s with short black hair. After losing sight of the suspect, Lupe heard a door slam and then the sound of a car speeding away. She doesn't recall hearing a car start, though.
Later that Monday, Detective Herman starts contacting first responders to see if they can offer any additional information.
At one point, he speaks with Carlos Gallegos, the person who examined Rebecca at the scene. Gallegos recounts that he found it odd that she had no apparent injuries, especially for someone claiming to have been knocked unconscious.
Investigators begin to question the plausibility of Rebecca Cleland's story. Carjackers don't usually chase down and murder a victim, then leave the car behind.
Even though there are multiple red flags, nothing points to Rebecca as the shooter.
Hollenbeck Police Station, Tuesday, July 29th, 1997. Law enforcement meets with Steve Rivera, who appears in a photograph with Rebecca that had been recovered from the SUV.
The authorities learn that Rivera is a stripper who runs a small stable of exotic dancers. Rivera explains that he performed at Rebecca's bachelorette party back in January.
He admits that he had a sexual relationship with her before and after she'd married Bruce. Rebecca had lavish gifts and money on him and paid his rent.
Rivera claims that he stopped seeing Rebecca because he didn't like the way she treated Bruce, saying she married him for his money and kicked him out of his own house.
Rivera provides an alibi for the night of the murder. It checks out. He's crossed off law enforcement's list of possible suspects.
In the early morning hours of Saturday, July 26, 1997, 43-year-old software engineer Bruce Cleland is gunned down in East Los Angeles, California, during an apparent carjacking. Yet, during the first 48 hours of the homicide investigation, inconsistencies begin to arise between crime scene evidence and wife Rebecca Cleland's narrative, leaving police to wonder if there's more to the case than a random act of violence.
On the evening of the murder, Rebecca had invited Bruce to dinner, telling him she wanted to reconcile the marriage after 3 months living apart. Yet the more detectives dig into her past, the more they learn that not only was she unfaithful, but she also may have only married Bruce for his money.
After the funeral, Rebecca retains a lawyer to help her collect Bruce's life insurance policies. As his wife, she's also entitled to his work benefits, around $100,000, which she accesses immediately.
Rebecca uses her newfound wealth to help out her financially strapped cousin, Alvaro, who's the son of Arturo Quezada. Alvaro had moved in with Rebecca soon after Bruce moved out because she feared living alone.
Rebecca soon starts confiding in a woman named Elizabeth Lamb, who'd photographed her wedding to Bruce and subsequently become an acquaintance.
In early August 1997, Elizabeth ends up contacting the LAPD. She'd grown suspicious of Rebecca after finding out that Rebecca had claimed her engagement ring was stolen during the carjacking. Elizabeth distinctly remembers seeing the ring on Rebecca's finger at Bruce's funeral.
Elizabeth ends up meeting with lead detective Tom Herman at Hollenbeck Police Station.
Herman tells Elizabeth that Rebecca is a suspect in her husband's murder. He then asks Elizabeth if she would continue being a trusted friend and report back to them anything she learns.
About a week later, Elizabeth visits Rebecca at home. She hides a voice-activated tape recorder in her purse and tries to get Rebecca to discuss Bruce's death.
The ruse doesn't work because Alvaro is home and won't let Rebecca talk about it. However, Elizabeth does observe how close Alvaro and Rebecca are, acting more like lovers than blood relatives.
When Elizabeth reports what she saw to police, they decide to look deeper into Alvaro.
In late September, detectives re-interview Steve Rivera, who's worked with Alvaro Quezada at different strip clubs throughout Los Angeles.
They asked Steve to confirm Alvaro's alibi. Alvaro had claimed that he was with Steve when Bruce was murdered.
When Steve checks the schedule for his dancers, he reports that he had a stripping gig that night in El Monte, but Alvaro was not with him.
Even though they've caught Alvaro in a lie, investigators must still figure out if he had motive to want Bruce Cleland dead.
Since May 1997, 1 month after Rebecca and Bruce separated, Alvaro had been living in Bruce's home. Rebecca was even paying his cell phone bill.
Alvaro stood to lose his meal ticket if Bruce and Rebecca reconciled, which could be indicative of a possible motive.
Los Angeles, California, Friday, October 17, 1997. Detective Herman meets with Rebecca's sister, Lorraine Salcido.
Not only does Lorraine share that Rebecca did not love Bruce and wanted him dead, but she also claims that one night out at a bar, Rebecca asked if she knew anyone who would kill Bruce.
That November, authorities return to La Paria, hoping the waitress who served Bruce and Rebecca the night of the murder can provide more details.
Even though months have passed, the waitress remembers the couple's visit. She also remembers that Rebecca not only made a call on the restaurant's payphone that night, but also seemed to make several other sneaky calls on her cell phone.
Detective Herman looks into what numbers were called from the restaurant's public phone number that night. The only call was made to an Ilma Lopez, but it was the wrong number.
However, Herman is able to confirm that the person the caller was looking for was Jose Quezada, Alvaro Quezada's brother, which makes him Rebecca's cousin too.
Investigators run a background check on Jose. They find out he's an ex-gang member with a lengthy rap sheet who was recently released from jail.
On Wednesday, December the 3rd, 1997, Detective Herman visits eyewitness Lupe Hernandez at work. He shows her a photographic six-pack of men matching the suspect description she gave to police.
Lupe chooses photo number 4, Jose Quezada.
Detectives develop the theory that Jose and Alvaro conspired with Rebecca to murder Bruce. The motive? Financial gain.
Just months before Bruce's murder, Rebecca took out several life insurance policies on her husband that covered accidental death. Although they were paid for with Bruce's credit cards, police suspect he was unaware of their existence.
As the beneficiary of these insurance policies, as well as the benefits from Bruce's work, Rebecca Cleland stood to gain almost $1 million from the death of her husband.
By December 1997, 5 months after Bruce Cleland was shot and killed at an intersection in East Los Angeles, homicide detectives have developed the operating theory that his wife, 28-year-old Rebecca, commissioned her cousins Jose and Alvaro Quezada to commit the murder. Los Angeles, California, Tuesday, February 17, 1998, 12:30 p.m. Jose Quezada and Rebecca Cleland are photographed and booked into LA County Jail.
Rebecca is held in jail for falsely reporting the theft of a ring, while further evidence is collected to support murder charges. Police must find something concrete to hold Jose, unless they let him walk away.
Investigators bring Lupe Hernandez down to the station for a lineup.
When Lupe is asked if she recognizes anyone from the night of Bruce's murder, she tells detectives, "I'm 98% positive number 6 was the man I saw that night. Number 6 is Jose Quezada."
Still, the positive ID isn't enough to convince the DA's office to bring murder charges against Jose Quezada. He walks out of jail 2 days later.
Before long, Jose's back in the crosshairs after an informant comes forward claiming Jose approached him on 2 occasions about needing a gun for a hit he and Alvaro needed to carry out.
On April 16, 1998, Detective Peterson arrests Alvaro for conspiracy to commit murder. That same day, Detective Herman takes Jose Quezada into custody again, charging him with murder.
As for Rebecca, she remains behind bars, now charged with murder.
Who exactly is Rebecca Cleland?
Rebecca Salcedo was born in August 1969, the youngest of 3 daughters to Lucy Quezada.
Sadly, Lucy suffers from an addiction to painkillers and rarely leaves her bed, which results in constant turmoil in the Salcedo home. Rebecca and her sisters are highly competitive and fight constantly. They sometimes even sleep with one another's boyfriends out of spite.
At 15, Rebecca ends up marrying an immigrant so he can get a green card. She's paid $2,000.
Rebecca is fully aware of a particular talent to seduce men into doing exactly what she wants.
In February 1991, 21-year-old Rebecca is arrested for cocaine possession with intent to sell and sentenced to 3 years in a state prison.
Shortly after Rebecca is released in 1994, her mother kills herself with a pistol. The suicide has a profound impact, leading Rebecca to seek comfort in the arms of various different men.
One weekend in December 1995, Rebecca is selling spices at the local swap meet in Santa Fe Springs, California. Bruce Cleland shows up at her booth with his father.
Bruce, who's naturally shy, quickly becomes taken with Rebecca. He asks for her phone number.
Bruce and Rebecca start dating. Before long, he's spending large sums of money to keep her happy.
Bruce buys Rebecca an SUV, a speedboat and trailer, and a hot tub. He takes her on vacations to Hawaii and Mexico, and even gives her copies of his credit cards. Rebecca ends up paying for breast implants, a nose job, and collagen injection for her lips. Yet, she still wants more.
Just 9 months into their relationship, she convinces him to buy her a $350,000 house. Bruce expects to live there in the house with Rebecca. Instead, she contrives a story saying they cannot live together or be sexually intimate until they're married.
In the fall of 1996, Bruce buys Rebecca a $10,000 engagement ring.
On October 25th, 1996, they marry in a small civil ceremony. However, Rebecca still forbids Bruce from moving in until after they have an official Catholic wedding, which takes place the following January.
Following the lavish $40,000 wedding, the Clelands honeymoon in Hawaii. But it's a disaster as Bruce's sexual inexperience affects their ability to be intimate.
Once they return home, the situation further deteriorates. Rebecca repeatedly tells Bruce to move out, and on April 20th, after only 3 months of marriage, Bruce moves back into his parents' home.
When Rebecca begins making plans to divorce Bruce, she gets a rude awakening.
Rebecca learns she won't get half of what Bruce has. Instead, she's only entitled to about $5,000.
Police believe that's when Rebecca realized that Bruce was worth more dead than alive.
By April 1998, the LAPD has arrested 28-year-old Rebecca Cleland and her two cousins, Jose and Alvaro Quezada. Homicide detectives suspect that Rebecca masterminded the July 1997 ambush that resulted in her husband Bruce being shot to death at an East Los Angeles intersection.
Rebecca, Jose, and Alvaro all face charges of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with special circumstances, which makes them eligible for the death penalty.
In June 2000, Rebecca Cleland, Jose Quezada, and Alvaro Quezada stand trial together at Los Angeles Criminal Court.
The prosecution highlights her bad character, as well as the accidental death insurance policies she'd taken out on Bruce prior to the murder.
Prosecutors also illustrate the extremely out-of-the-way route Rebecca had chosen to drive home that night, which they allege was intentional, so that she could get Bruce to the spot where Jose was lying in wait to execute him.
According to the state, overwhelming greed led Rebecca Cleland to solicit her cousin's assistance in murdering Bruce. Prosecutors finger Jose Quezada as the trigger man. On Thursday, June 29, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, a jury convicts Rebecca, Jose, and Alvaro on all charges. All three are sentenced to life without parole.
Yet in the aftermath of the trial, Rebecca and Jose get a second chance when detectives have placed the two of them into the same squad car after their arrests and asked them questions without reading their Miranda rights. They've violated the cousins' rights.
Since Rebecca and Jose's responses were used in open court to incriminate them, the California Court of Appeals reverses their convictions. The decision is upheld by the California Supreme Court in August 2003.
In November 2006, Rebecca Cleland and Jose Quezada are retried.
The prosecution's case again relies on circumstantial evidence to convict Rebecca and Lupe Hernandez's eyewitness identification to link Jose Quezada to Bruce Cleland's murder. Rebecca's defense team executes a different strategy this time. They admit Rebecca drove Bruce to the corner of Concord and Beswick, but only so Jose and Alvaro could confront him about family issues. She didn't know Jose planned to kill him.
The jury rejects Rebecca's tale and finds her guilty of murder with special circumstances. She's once again sentenced to life without parole.
With respect to Jose, the judge declares a mistrial. Rebecca's antagonistic defense had ended up pitting her and Jose against one another, which, if she had been found innocent, would have precluded his acquittal.
3 weeks later, Jose Quezada returns to court by himself for a third trial.
Jose is eventually found guilty of murder with special circumstances. Like Rebecca and Alvaro, he is sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
You can put these killers on the couch, you can psychoanalyze them, but sometimes it just comes down to cold, hard cash and cold-hearted people.
This seems to be one of those cases where right from the beginning, Rebecca's motivations were nefarious.